Chapter 1972. At this time, Xiaohua took out the token the Empress gave him and looked it over. At that time, the Empress said that if I built my foundation, I could help her with something. Now that I've built my foundation, I should repay her kindness. However, I have to bring Shui along and help her build her foundation, so it's not too convenient. Let's wait until after this experience. Oh, also, the space at the back of my head is different from a storage bag. It actually isolates the information from the tokens, communication talismans, tokens, and other items. Even if I meet the queen in the vicinity, the tokens and other items will not have any reaction. It is better for me to place these useful items in a separate storage bag. If I am really able to meet her, it will be fate. Soon after, Xiaohua organized all the things he needed, put them in the storage pouch, and tied it to his waist. Only then did he decide to practice the two spells first. Then, he would study the characters of Confucian cultivators. The other spells could only be put aside for later. After finishing his arrangements, Xiaohua calmed his mind, closed his eyes, and immersed his divine sense into the jade slip. He silently read the earth condensation technique's formula word by word. 10 days later, Xiaohua's figure flew out of the cave. He scanned the surroundings with his divine sense, raised his head to identify the direction, and used the bright thunder escape to fly towards a certain place. He flew for another 10 days. When his divine sense saw a flourishing place, he unconsciously frowned and stopped. Then, with a wave of his hand, he took out a jade slip. He immersed his divine sense into it and carefully looked at it. He looked around and muttered to himself, "According to the message left by Xie Zhiqian from the Immortal Ascension sect, it should be here. However, this place is obviously a paradise on earth. How could there be such a rare spiritual herb like the heavenly een grass? Could it be that someone planted the heavenly een grass here? However, since the heavenly een grass is a miraculous alchemy item that can work together with thunder attribute materials, how could it be planted here? Since this place is still in the country of Shi, my Imperial Thunder sect is famous for thunder attribute spells. It's impossible that we don't know about this place, right? Xie Zhiqian also couldn't have used this thing to invite Martial Uncle Zhenyi, right? Maybe Xie Zhiqian and the others have already left? Xiaohua was somewhat regretful. When he saw Xie Zhiqian in Flame Forest Marsh, he promised to bring the jade slip to Zhenyi. However, Zhenyi had already died, so the jade slip naturally couldn't be delivered to Zhenyi. Xiaohua had only inadvertently seen the contents when he used a secret technique to break the blood-colored seal. However, since it was something planned by a Jindan cultivator, Xiaohua absolutely didn't participate in it out of curiosity. Wasn't the miserable situation at that time an absolutely good lesson? However, just as Shui helplessly handed over the jade slip containing the Ling Lei pill to Xiaohua, Xiaohua suddenly thought of this matter. Since the heavenly een grass was useful for Shui's foundation establishment, Xiaohua had no choice but to brace himself and come over to take a look to see if there were any opportunities. Of course, Xiaohua's heart was also perturbed at this moment. Cooperating with a golden core cultivator, he was definitely at a disadvantage. Last time, he had Zhenyi, a golden core cultivator, as his backing, so he dared to bargain with others. But this time, he was alone, so he was definitely asking a tiger for its skin. However, that jade slip was given to Xiaohua by Xie Zhiqian 4 years ago. Who knew if this matter had already passed? Let's go over and take a look first. If a senior has the opportunity to obtain the heavenly een grass, I also have to see what price I can pay to exchange for it, right? Xiaohua didn't want to let go of this rare clue, so he released his divine sense and carefully and slowly flew forward. After flying for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, there was still a field of flowers and plants in front of him. A light breeze blew past, and bursts of floral fragrance brushed against his face, making Xiaohua feel slightly tipsy. This place. Xiaohua's divine sense swept past a few swaying flower branches, and he suddenly discovered some fluctuations of spiritual power. This seems to be a formation. Xiaohua had immersed himself in the Tao of formations these past few years, and his cultivation in the field of formations had greatly increased. If it was before, he definitely wouldn't have been able to discover it, but now he could easily detect it. Moreover, in the blink of an eye, he had come up with several possible ways to break it. This is strange. Why would there be a formation here? Xiaohua's divine sense locked onto the location of the formation, and he pondered. Xie Zhiqian didn't say much, he only told me to come here to find him. With his unfamiliar friendship with martial uncle Zhenyi, he wouldn't easily divulge the location of where he was going. This is probably the place where they gathered in advance. Thinking of this, Xiaohua seemed to have a card up his sleeve. He stood in midair and respectfully waited, and he didn't hurry to use his divine sense to search around. Sure enough, after the time it took to eat a meal, a hurricane seemed to blow up where Xiaohua stood, stirring up the flowers and plants in the vicinity of 100 feet. However, those flowers and plants didn't fly into the air, but instead strangely sucked into the ground. Waves of tearing force appeared all over Xiaohua's body, as if they wanted to tear his body into pieces. However, Xiaohua turned a deaf ear to them and didn't pay any attention to them. He knew that as long as he left this position, these forces would immediately become real. If he stood still and didn't move, these forces would become illusions. Just as Xiaohua expected, although all kinds of forces appeared, as soon as they came into contact with his Taoist robe, they all turned into nothingness like a breeze blowing through the flowers and plants. Immediately after, from the place where the hurricane was sucked in, 2 rays of brilliance appeared like blooming spring flowers. 2 female cultivators dressed in beautiful clothes appeared on the left and right. These 2 female cultivators were both in their 40s, and their appearances were quite beautiful. Each of them held a flower branch in their hands, but the flowers on the branches were different. "Hey, which sect are you a disciple of? Why are you so rash as to wander in front of my burial flower manor?" The female cultivator beside Xiaohua, dressed in blue clothes and holding a plum blossom in her hand, scolded without any trace of politeness. Xiaohua's divine sense swept over them, and he knew that they were both in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm. He didn't dare to be negligent, and he immediately cupped his hands and said, "I am a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect, and my name is Xiaohua." A disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect? What are you doing here? The female cultivator on the right was dressed in blue clothes and held a begonia flower branch in her hand. She looked at the female cultivator on the left and asked curiously. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said with an apologetic smile, "Let me tell you, fellow Taoists. I came here to find Senior Xie Zhiqian from the Immortal Ascension Sect." Immortal Ascension Sect? The female cultivator on the left was very eloquent, and she immediately asked, "If you are looking for the Immortal Ascension Sect, you will naturally go to Meng country. Why did fellow Taoist Xiao come to my burial flower manor?" This. Xiaohua hesitated for a moment, then slapped his hand and took out the jade slip from his storage pouch. He explained, "I have Senior Xie's jade slip. I can find him here, so I came." The female cultivator shook her head and replied, "There is only burial flower manor here, and there is no Xie Zhiqian. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please go back." So it's like that. Xiaohua's face showed disappointment, and he sighed, cupped his hands, and said, "Many thanks, fellow Taoist. I have disturbed you." With that, Xiaohua turned around and was about to leave, but the eyes of the female cultivator on the right lit up, and her face showed respect, as if she had heard an order, and she said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, please wait a moment. When did you get this jade slip?" Xiaohua was happy and quickly said, "I saw Senior Xie 4 years ago in Flame Forest Swamp." The female cultivator nodded and said, "Okay, let me see the jade slip." Xiaohua waved his hand, and the jade slip flew to the female cultivator. The female cultivator took it, and she used her divine sense to check it. After looking for a moment, she said strangely, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, this jade slip should be for Senior Zhenyi, right? Why are you here?" Xiaohua's face showed a sad expression and he said, "Alas, Martial Uncle Zhenyi died in Flame Forest Swamp, so I can't give this jade slip to Martial Uncle." "Okay, since it is like this, I will thank fellow Taoist Xiao on behalf of Senior Xie. This jade slip? I will give it to Senior." The female cultivator waved her hand and put the jade slip into her storage bag. She said with a smile, "The disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect are indeed extraordinary. You specially came to report this matter, which surprised me. Seeing that the female cultivator took the jade slip without saying anything and said some words of admiration, Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said awkwardly, "Since fellow Taoist can give this jade slip to Senior Xie, then Senior Xie must be in Burial Flower Manor, right? Can I personally give it to Senior Xie?" "You little brat," the female cultivator on the left sneered, "I already told you that Senior Xie isn't here. Even if Big Sister is willing to give you the jade slip, it won't happen today. If you want to personally give it to Senior Xie, then you should take the jade slip to Meng Country's Immortal Ascension Gate." The female cultivator on the right was obviously more gentle. She stared at Xiaohua and said with a smile, "Does fellow Taoist Xiao have something to say to Senior Xie?" Xiaohua let out a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "I came here today for the thing in the jade slip." "Oh?" The female cultivator on the right raised her eyebrows and looked Xiaohua up and down again. She said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, you've just entered the Foundation establishment realm, so you should consolidate your realm. There are many useless good things, so you shouldn't covet them too much." "Alas, I'll let fellow Taoist know." Xiaohua smiled apologetically. "That thing is useful for Thunder Attribute disciples, but I have no use for it. I came here to ask for this thing for my dual cultivation partner to help her reach the Foundation establishment realm." "Hee," the female cultivator on the left laughed and said while covering her mouth, "What an affectionate person. Presumably, you two were already familiar with each other when you were in the aura refinement realm, right? Now that you've reached the Foundation establishment realm, you still want to look for an opportunity to reach the Foundation establishment realm for her and plan for a beautiful future? Fellow Taoist, you're wise." Xiaohua smiled bitterly. "My master wants to find a female Foundation establishment realm disciple to dual cultivate with, but I'm still thinking about my former junior sister. I can't forget the oath of eternal love, right? That's why I came here." "Good. Not bad." The female cultivator on the right didn't say anything, but the female cultivator on the left gave him a thumbs up. Once other people reach the Foundation establishment realm, they either consolidate their realm or set their sights on female Foundation establishment realm disciples. They're all thinking about their own future. There really aren't many people like you who don't forget your old love. If Senior Sister doesn't help you, I won't. However, before she finished speaking, the female cultivator on the right immediately berated her. Junior Sister. Chapter 1973. That's right, she didn't even ask what Xiaohua wanted and just said she would help him. This female cultivator on the left was really straightforward. "Senior Sister." The female cultivator on the left smiled and said, "Little sister just wants to." At this moment, a voice as clear as an oriole and as gentle as jade sounded. "You two don't quarrel. Hying, let him come in and talk." "Yes, Manor Lord." The two people's faces became serious, and they bowed and said in unison. Soon after, the female cultivator on the right who was holding a begonia branch waved the begonia branch. The many begonia flowers on the branch emitted a bright brilliance. Each begonia flower seemed to bloom. They separated from the branch and hovered in front of the female cultivator for a moment. As the female cultivator made a hand seal, they turned into several strange diagrams. Finally, as the female cultivator made a hand seal, they flew to her feet. Rumble. Like a hot spring, waves of flowers gushed out from the place where the begonia flowers flew to. These waves of flowers directly divided into 3 groups and flew to the feet of Xiaohua and the 2 female cultivators respectively. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, please follow me inside." The female cultivator named Haitang stepped on the waves of flowers. At this moment, Xiaohua saw that Haitang was barefoot. On her white and delicate bare feet, her 10 toes were painted pink. "Please," Xiaohua retracted his gaze, slightly cupped his hands, and also stepped onto the wave of flowers. Then, the wave of flowers suddenly enveloped upwards, and thousands of spinning flowers surrounded Xiaohua, hugging Xiaohua as they fell towards the flowers and plants. And in the middle of the rotating waves of flowers, a strange brilliance flashed very faintly, and a flower that didn't exist suddenly appeared. "Xiaohua, Haitang, and the others didn't notice it at all. In just a moment, Xiaohua's eyes lit up. The surrounding gorgeous flowers all disappeared, and a rather spectacular manor appeared in front of him. The manor was built on a plain and surrounded by hills that weren't high. As far as his eyes could see, it was dozens of miles in size. There were many pavilions and galleries inside, and there were also many rockery and lakes. However, Xiaohua's divine sense couldn't leave his body. It was probably restricted by a large formation. Xiaohua slightly raised his head again, only to see floating clouds in the azure sky above his head. Occasionally, a few birds would fly through the air, and the chirping sounds could be clearly heard. This formation is not inferior to the Skygate Mountain's water-cutting formation. Xiaohua thought to himself in awe as he slowly descended. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please. Haitang and another female cultivator landed beside Xiaohua and pointed at the several zhang tall gate of the villa not far away. Please, Xiaohua returned the courtesy and followed Haitang to the villa. The gate of this villa was different from what Xiaohua usually saw. It was a semicircle about 10 zhang in size, like a semicircle formed by twisting some kind of strange vine. On top of the semicircle, there were all kinds of colorful flowers. Some were round, some were star-shaped, some were flat, and there were even strings of sparks. The two sides of the manor's gate were even more bizarre. Large trees were lined up side by side, like guards protecting the manor behind them. Although the gaps between these trees were large enough, Xiaohua knew that there was definitely an extremely powerful restriction in the middle. Buried Flower Manor. When Xiaohua walked closer, on the gate of the villa surrounded by vines, for big words composed of flowers of different colors suddenly flashed. It was very conspicuous. Buried Flower Manor? Xiaohua's eyes turned slightly. Whether it was the ancient records of the Imperial Thunder Sect or Huang Yi's imprint, there was no trace of this place. Moreover, Huang Yi didn't mention the name of the place on the jade slip. He really didn't expect that there would be such a strange villa not far from Haoming City. The female cultivator named Haitang is already a cultivator in the middle stage of foundation establishment. Their villa master should at least be a cultivator in the early stage of gold core, and even a cultivator in the late stage of gold core wouldn't be surprising. This kind of cultivation, this kind of power, I'm afraid it's second only to the 7 major cities. It's more powerful than any cultivation family. I'm afraid that the Lingpei villa I encountered before isn't even worthy of carrying their shoes. While Xiaohua was pondering, he had already followed the two into the villa. What he saw inside the villa was somewhat different from what he saw when he descended from the sky. After walking along the gallery formed by petals and vines for half a cup of tea's time, they arrived in front of an azure lake. In the middle of the lake, there was a faint white mist in the air. In the white mist, there was a small bridge that led directly to the lake. When they arrived at the small bridge by the lake, Haitang stopped and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I can't accompany you. Please go to Linlang Pavilion alone." "Many thanks, fellow Taoist." After Xiaohua cupped his hands and bowed to the two, he slowly stepped onto the small bridge. Soon after, he was in no hurry and slowly walked along the small bridge into the white mist. This small foundation establishment cultivator is somewhat interesting. The female cultivator on the left looked at Xiaohua's appearance and said somewhat strangely. Haitang tilted her head and seemed to be thinking about something. She asked, "Plum Blossom, do you think this cultivator called Xiaohua is too calm?" "Hee, probably. It can't be called calm. To be able to cultivate to the early stage of foundation establishment, his temperament must be calm. Although he doesn't look old, he must have used a youth-preserving spirit pill. He can't be too young." Plum Blossom said with a smile, "Elder sister, don't you think the way he walked to Linlang Pavilion is too strange? In my impression, apart from Taoist Master Yen Hong who walked step by step, all the other cultivators, including some qi-refining cultivators, as long as they find that there is no restriction on the small bridge, they will use magic, fly, or shrink to show off in front of Villa Lord. This perhaps." Haitang didn't agree with Plum Blossom's idea too much. She said noncommittally, "Perhaps he feels that there is a restriction on the small bridge, or he is afraid that using magic will trigger the restriction." "Forget it, In the end, this is a small cultivator who is affectionate and righteous. If Villa Lord can help him, that would be the best. We will wait here. While they were talking, a flower basket flew out from the white mist and quickly flew in front of Haiti. Haitang extended her hand and took out the jade slip Xiaohua gave her. She placed it in the flower basket, and the flower basket quickly flew back. Xiaohua stepped on the small bridge and looked around while walking. Under his feet was the azure lake. Countless fish swam back and forth while swinging their tails. There were also some aquatic plants around the fish. When the breeze blew, faint ripples appeared on the surface of the lake. The aquatic plants also slowly swayed along with the ripples. The small bridge under his feet was also made of rattan bamboo-like plants. It was somewhat slippery and even had some moss. It looked like it had been there for a long time. It is really strange. Xiaohua criticized inwardly. This is obviously a cultivator's villa, but whether it is the villa's gate, walls, or this small bridge, they are all no different from those in the mortal world. There doesn't seem to be any restriction on this small bridge. While he was thinking, Xiaohua walked in front of the white mist. Inside the white mist, nothing could be seen clearly. He could only vaguely see that the small bridge was still extending into the distance. Xiaohua's footsteps were still steady. Without the slightest hesitation, he plunged into the white mist. Chapter 1974. However, as soon as his figure entered the white fog, he immediately walked out of it. Not only was the rich heaven and earth spiritual chi rushing towards him, but there was also a group of pavilions on the water in front of him. Rows upon rows of picturesque pavilions were lined up on the water's surface. Countless emerald green round leaves covered the water's surface, and thumb-thick rhombus stems were raised high into the air. Pink, light green, light blue, pink-white, vermilion, golden yellow, and other flowers of different sizes were floating around the galleries and pavilions, making Xiaohua feel a little dizzy. Before Xiaohua could even look around, a burst of ding-dong, like the sound of clear spring water, flowed into his ears. A wave of refreshing feeling instantly emerged from Xiaohua's mind, and actually flowed down along his meridians. Soon, the Jinyuan in his meridians completed a large circulation, and the amount of earth crystal Yao milk was actually more than twice as much as the one he had refined before. Excellent! Xiaohua was overjoyed and thought, this Manor Lord's cultivation is probably even higher than Martial Uncle Zhen Qing's. Unfortunately, it was only a single cycle. Although the zither music was pleasing to the ear and incomparably comfortable to listen to, it no longer had the effect of refining the earth crystal Yao milk. Senior, this way please. A beautiful female cultivator walked out of the pavilion in front of Xiaohua and said with a smile while bowing. Thank you for your trouble. Xiaohua nodded and took a few steps forward. The pavilion before his eyes was actually changing like a kaleidoscope. Numerous beautiful and young female cultivators wore clothes that were embroidered with gold and jade, and they either held jade plates, spirit fruits, or feathered fans made from the wings of spirit beasts in their hands as they shuttled back and forth in the pavilion. Giggles and whispers instantly filled Xiaohua's eyes. The only thing that didn't change was the melodious zither sound that resounded from somewhere in the distance, yet as far as his eyes could see, there was no trace of it. Xiaohua followed the female cultivator all the way forward. The female cultivators he met all avoided him and bowed respectfully, calling him senior. The female cultivators each had their own merits. Xiaohua was dazzled, but he still smiled and nodded slightly. He couldn't see anything in his eyes. If he forced himself to say something, it would be envy in his eyes. Needless to say, with the formation of the Burial Flower Manor, the middle stage foundation establishment cultivator who went out to greet Xiaohua, and the beautiful female cultivators in the pavilion, Xiaohua knew that the Manor Lord of the Burial Flower Manor not only had an extraordinary cultivation, but also had an extraordinary background. He had cultivated for many years, but he didn't know when he would be able to reach such a height. But after thinking about it, it wasn't as if he didn't have such an opportunity. Let's take Tianmen Mountain as an example. Huang Tianle seemed to be entrusting him with all the arrays of Tianmen Mountain to him so that he could repair them. It was as if he was putting Tianmen Mountain in front of him. Even if he was really just an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator, he could easily take over the Heavenly Gate Mountain. Well, taking a step back, he wasn't so shameless as to use the ambiguous relationship he had with Huang Mingxiang in his dream to take control of the Heavenly Gate Mountain, right? However, not only did he not act according to Huang Tianle's plan and Huang Mingxiang's dream, he instead helped Huang Mang and Huang Mingxiang reach the foundation establishment stage. He taught all of the formation repair techniques to Huang Mingxiang and left with a flick of his sleeves. Xiaohua didn't think of himself as a saint, and he was greedy for a lot of small favors. But to be honest, he wasn't particularly interested in controlling a sect or a family. He felt that it was a burden. It was far from being alone, or traveling the world with the person he loved, free and unfettered. Forget it. I guess this young master isn't that kind of person who is obsessed with fame and craves for luxury. Xiaohua thought clearly, and some of the admiration in his eyes disappeared. He only smiled and nodded, and his eyes were full of interest as he admired the scenery of the water. Xiaohua followed the female cultivator around who knows how many bends and walked past who knows how many unique pavilions. But from beginning to end, the elegant sound of the zither continued to linger in his ears, neither high nor low. Just as Xiaohua felt a little strange and wanted to raise his eyes to look ahead, a huge water screen appeared in front of him. On the water screen, he saw a school of unknown colorful fish leisurely swimming back and forth, as if they were in midair. "Senior, please." The female cultivator walked in front of the water curtain and didn't move forward. She smiled and said, "Senior, after passing through here, the Linlang Pavilion is in front. Forgive this junior for not being able to accompany you." "Hehe, thank you, fellow Taoist." He cupped his hands and stepped into the water curtain without hesitation. Whoosh! The sound of water echoed, as if he was walking in the lake. Xiaohua even felt the pressure of the water around him, but his Taoist robe didn't have the slightest trace of water. Apart from an illusion, what else could it be? The water curtain wasn't short. Xiaohua walked no less than 10 steps before he came out of the water curtain. What greeted him made him stunned. Previously, he was used to seeing gorgeous waterside pavilions of different styles. He originally thought that the Manor Master's place would be even more dazzling, but the waterside pavilion in front of him was completely woven out of emerald green bamboo that was as thick as a thumb. However, when his gaze once again fell on the emerald green bamboo that was like amber, sparkling and translucent like jasper, he couldn't help but cry out in surprise in his heart, "Waterside orchid bamboo?" Xiaohua obviously didn't recognize waterside orchid bamboo. The reason why he was able to call out the name of this bamboo was because he had the inherited memories of the fire ape and Chao Li from the distant past era in his mind, as well as the inheritance of ghost cultivators from Huang Yi. How could a name that came from these places be easy to recognize? Damn it, this kind of distant past era variant is the best material to refine wood-type magic tools. Unexpectedly, someone used it to make a pavilion. If I didn't see it with my own eyes. Xiaohua sighed. It seems that compared to this burial flower manor, Tianmen Mountain's Huang clan is like comparing a country bumpkin to generations of scholars. Xiaohua knew that this waterside orchid bamboo was not a simple bamboo. This bamboo contained rich wood-type spiritual energy that attracted a type of spiritual insect called waterside orchid. The waterside orchid was only the size of a baby's pinky nail and was emerald green in color. It liked the aura of waterside orchid bamboo the most and also liked to attach itself to this bamboo. From the time a waterside orchid bamboo was born, it was unknown how many waterside orchids would attach themselves to it. And after these waterside orchids attached themselves to the bamboo, they would no longer move. Even after they died, their bodies would crystallize and become one with the waterside orchid bamboo. Therefore, waterside orchid bamboo was the best material to refine magic tools. In the distant past era, there were many famous wood-type magic tools that were refined from waterside orchid bamboo. It was also because of this that many almighty people used their various magical abilities to obtain these waterside orchid bamboo. This thing was like the mirage butterfly. It had long since disappeared from the Dawn Rain continent. If Xiaohua didn't obtain some memories from the distant past era, he would have definitely treated this strange-looking bamboo as an ordinary object. Since he knew the rarity of waterside orchid bamboo, Xiaohua had a bit of expectation towards the manor master of Burial Flower Manor. Presumably, he would be able to obtain the sky-in grass from this person. Unfortunately, although the Linlang Pavilion was right in front of him, the situation inside was blurry. Only as Xiaohua approached step by step, did his field of vision gradually become clear. This was a pavilion that faced the lake on all four sides. It didn't look any different from what he usually saw. At the end of the pavilion, there was a female cultivator wearing plain clothes who was bending over and playing the 9-string zither. Because her head was lowered, he couldn't see her face clearly. However, her beautiful pitch-black hair that was like a cloud was coiled up high on top of her head. Along with the sound of the zither, her hair slightly trembled. Just like this, it was as if that trembling had grabbed onto Xiaohua's heart, attracting all of his attention to the female cultivator's body. The sound of "see" only lasted for a moment before Xiaohua realized that he had forgotten himself. He used God's guidance and felt a burst of coolness in his heart. He sucked in a breath of cold air and promptly shifted his gaze away, looking all around. There were only a few people in the pavilion. In addition to the female cultivator sitting cross-legged on a praying mat and playing the zither, there were 4 female cultivators who were slightly older. These 4 female cultivators were dressed differently. The colors of their clothes were also completely different. Some were light green, some were fiery red, some were azure, and some were snow white. It seemed to be somewhat in line with the colors of the 4 seasons. These 4 female cultivators all had smiles on their faces. Their gazes were fixed on the female cultivator in the seat of honor, as if they didn't notice Xiaohua's arrival at all. Late Foundation Establishment Realm. Xiaohua's gaze caught sight of them. His divine sense very naturally swept out. To his surprise, he discovered that the 4 female cultivators all had an astonishing cultivation base of Late Foundation Establishment Realm. Thus, in his shock, he promptly withdrew his divine sense and very cleverly stood with his hands by his side. He lowered his head and opened his ears, carefully listening. Xiaohua didn't know anything about music. The only bit of knowledge he had was that he had heard of Zhen Qing's flute. However, this female cultivator's zither sound was the same as Zhen Qing's flute. They were both extremely pure. Xiaohua could hear the high mountains and flowing water, the chirping of birds and the hissing of insects from the zither sound. Even Xiaohua could almost see the scene of a cheerful yet distressed young girl washing her muslin at the head of the stream in the spring. Zheng, a light sound, like a sharp sword cutting through the spring sun, broke the tranquility and gentleness. The zither sound was unexpectedly cut off. Xiaohua raised his head in astonishment. He saw the female cultivator's slender and white fingers trembling in the air. Below her fingers, a zither string was like a frozen snake that had withered to the side. Villa Master. The maid closest to the female cultivator was also astonished and said in a low voice. Sigh. Hearing the female cultivator's light sigh, that sound was so heartbreaking. Xiaohua almost wanted to turn into a zither string and let the female cultivator continue to play. Don't be so heartbroken. Following the female cultivator's light sigh, the female cultivator raised her head. Xiaohua's gaze very naturally swept upwards. The moment he swept his gaze, the corner of his eyes unconsciously twitched. This female cultivator seemed to only be in her 20s, but her appearance was truly pure and lovely. Xiaohua only saw her once and felt that she was like a celestial being. Xiaohua had previously seen many female cultivators, such as Sun Shu, Xue Xue, Hongxia Fairy, Huang Mengxiang, and so on. He originally thought that Hongxia Fairy's beauty was the only one in the entire Dawn Rain continent. However, after seeing this female cultivator's beauty, he realized that the so-called Snow White Plum Blossom really had their own strengths. Chapter 1975. However, when he scanned her with his divine sense, he was even more astonished. This young female cultivator was actually at the middle stage of the Gold Core realm. Chun Kuei, take the zither. The female cultivator waved her hand and said in a clear voice. Yes, Villa Lord. The female cultivator in light blue clothes on the left nodded and walked forward. She reached out and took the 9-string zither. She hugged it in a very natural manner and returned to her original position. Qiuzhan, light the incense. The female cultivator ordered in a low voice. Yes. A blue-clothed female cultivator on the right answered and walked to the side of the table where the zither was placed. She reached out and put down the fist-sized incense burner. Then, she carefully took out a light green incense burner and placed it in the incense burner. Then, she reached out and a true samadhi fire appeared in her palm. With a flick of her finger, she ignited the incense burner. Immediately, a wisp of faint green smoke rushed straight to the top of the pavilion. Then, like a small snake, it swam around the entire pavilion. A refreshing fragrance entered Xiao Hua's nose like a blooming epiphyllum. Good. Xiao Hua was flabbergasted. Although Qiuzhan's samadhi true fire wasn't as pure as Xiao Hua's, it was still samadhi true fire. She actually used it to light incense. You're called Xiao Hua? The female cultivator asked softly. Her voice was as clear as pearls falling on a jade plate. Reporting to Senior, this junior is Xiao Hua from the Imperial Thunder Sect. Greetings, Villa Lord. Xiao Hua's heart trembled and he quickly bowed. And from what you said, you're looking for heavenly ingress? The female cultivator went straight to the point. What's the name of your dual cultivation partner? Junior's junior sister is called Xue Xue. She's a disciple of Sun Lei Palace. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and didn't hide anything. Junior sister Xue comes from Misty Mountain. She has a hidden lightning attribute constitution and needs heavenly ingress to stimulate her bloodline and build her foundation. And so she's a descendant of Misty Mountain. The female cultivator said thoughtfully. Misty Mountain has been very active recently. I heard that they've already taken Phoenix Ridge into their pocket. Ling Feiyun is very outstanding. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. How can Misty Mountain compare to Burial Flower Manor? I didn't expect the Manor Lord to take them seriously. Oh? Is that so? A trace of a smile flashed in the female cultivator's eyes. Tell me, how can my Burial Flower Manor look down on Misty Mountain? This. Xiao Hua was somewhat at a loss for words. He could only brace himself and say, I've also been to the Misty Mountain, but it seems I don't have enough foundation. Senior Ling Feiyun only has a foundation building cultivation base. Looking at the 4 sisters standing in front of the Manor Lord, all of them were in the late stage of the foundation establishment realm. Even if any one of them went to the Misty Mountain, they would be able to cover the sky with one hand. Manor Lord, how could the Misty Mountain compare to the Burial Flower Manor? Besides, the Misty Mountains are 2 barren mountains, and there's nothing good there. Just the ice orchid bamboo under your feet is comparable to the entire Misty Mountains, right? Hee hee, you sure know how to quibble. You even know about the Yulon bamboo. The female cultivator smiled and covered her mouth with her hand, looking extremely adorable. However, Misty Mountain has such a great reputation in the Daybreak continent. Have you heard of my Burial Flower Manor? What do you know about Burial Flower Manor? Xiao Hua said with a smile, Of course I didn't know before today, but after today, I'll definitely know. And I also know about the Misty Mountain because of junior sister Xue. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. The female cultivator nodded slightly. If you don't know about my Burial Flower Manor, why did you come here? My Burial Flower Manor doesn't like guests. If you weren't a disciple of the thunder-controlling sect, I would have already killed you and used you as fertilizer. No way, Xiao Hua said in a slightly exaggerated manner. Manor Lord looks very kind. How could you treat a junior like this? You think I won't? Seeing Xiao Hua like this, the female cultivator's expression suddenly changed. Her clothes slightly fluttered, and a force came from all directions of Xiao Hua, directly smashing towards him. Senior. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. The true essence in his body quickly circulated, and his magic power surged. He continuously rubbed his hands and used the Earth Shield technique. As expected of a disciple of the thunder-controlling sect. You have some skills. The female cultivator looked at Xiao Hua's body that was instantly covered with a sturdy yellow-brown shield, and her eyes unconsciously flashed with surprise. However, relying on this alone, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for you to escape from my burial flower sect. Along with the female cultivator's mocking voice, the shield around Xiao Hua's body broke inch by inch, turning into thick spiritual energy that scattered in the air. However, just as the female cultivator was about to cast another spell, a faint brilliance appeared around Xiao Hua's body, firmly blocking the female cultivator's magic power outside the brilliance. A protective magic treasure? The female cultivator suddenly understood and immediately used a bit of strength to withdraw her magic power. As expected of the rich and imposing thunder-controlling sect, a disciple who has just entered the Foundation establishment realm can have a protective magic treasure. I'm afraid ordinary disciples won't be able to. Many thanks for Manor Lord's mercy. Xiao Hua slightly frowned, not understanding the Manor Lord's actions. He smiled apologetically and said, Junior is naturally a disciple of the thunder-controlling sect. I have an identity token to prove it. Take out the token and let me see. The female cultivator said without any trace of politeness. When Xiao Hua took out the token, the female cultivator only waved her hand. A force that Xiao Hua felt was irresistible appeared in front of him, and the token flew into the female cultivator's hand. You're indeed from the thunder-controlling sect. Moreover, you're Xiao Hua from the thunder-shocking palace. The female cultivator waved her hand, and the token flew back to Xiao Hua. Forget it. Let me ask you, what did Xie Zhiqian say to you? Did he mention anything else about the heavenly ingress? Xiao Hua took the token. He understood that the female cultivator was probing him, and he carefully said, Senior Xie didn't say anything. That day, Junior was only following Martial Uncle Zhenyi to gain experience in the Flame Forest Swamp. Because Martial Uncle Zhenyi was chasing a spirit beast, Junior's cultivation was shallow, so Martial Uncle left me in a place to wait for news. However, Junior waited for a long time, but Martial Uncle Zhenyi didn't return. Junior followed the direction of the summoning talisman to look for him and then met Senior Xie. Junior is only a Foundation establishment realm cultivator, so why would Senior Xie say anything? What did he say? Say it word by word. The female cultivator didn't give up and continued to interrogate him. Xiao Hua's heart trembled. He didn't dare to be negligent and said Xie Zhiqian's words word by word. In the end, he said with a bitter smile, Junior knows that this matter has already passed for 4 years. However, because Martial Uncle Zhenyi died at that time, Junior's senior martial brother Xiang Yang brought his things back to the lightning-controlling sect. Junior didn't directly return. Therefore, it wasn't until a few days ago when Junior Martial sister told Junior about the difficulties of Foundation establishment that Junior remembered Senior Xie's jade slip. As he said this, a faint blush appeared on Xiao Hua's face. You came out with your Junior Martial sister to gain experience in the Foundation establishment realm. The female cultivator asked with interest. That's right. Xiao Hua nodded. Master always tells Junior who and what in the lightning-changing palace. Junior was annoyed by it, so Junior found an opportunity to come out with Junior Martial sister to gain experience. Lightning-changing palace. When the female cultivator heard this, her eyes slightly narrowed. However, she immediately smiled and said, You're quite bold, actually eloping with Junior Martial sister. Chapter 1976. I'm innocent, Senior. Junior only wants to help Junior Martial sister build her foundation. If she builds her foundation, Master will have nothing to say and won't use this to threaten Junior. Xiao Hua shouted. When Junior entered the Imperial Thunder sect, Junior Martial sister Shui took good care of me. If I don't dual cultivate with Junior Martial sister Shui, not to mention Junior's heart, even the heavens won't be happy, right? What a good, even the heavens won't be happy. The female cultivator was stunned, then clapped her hands and said, This sentence is actually from the bottom of my heart. Then the female cultivator asked, Who is your master? Senior, please no. It's the helplessness of Thunder Palace and myriad Thunder Valley. Xiao Hua didn't hide it at all. Helplessness? The female cultivator slightly frowned and thought for a moment, then shook her head and said, I've never heard of this name. He's an early gold core stage cultivator? Senior, please no. Master is only in the late foundation establishment stage. Xiaohua smiled apologetically and said, presumably, Senior doesn't know. The female cultivator obviously wasn't interested in the late foundation establishment stage. After thinking for a moment, she asked again, since you know that 4 years have passed, Xie Zhiqian definitely won't be here, and he won't use your Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. And even if he does use your Imperial Thunder Sect's methods, you, a Foundation Establishment disciple, are useless. What are you doing here? Xiaohua felt a bit strange and secretly said, do you still need to ask this question? However, he was still respectful and smiled apologetically and said, Junior naturally knows that Senior Xie's scheme has already passed. However, Junior still hopes to get lucky and came to take a look. If I can meet Senior Xie or a senior related to Senior Xie, Junior wants to ask, if there really is the heavenly Yin grass that Senior Xie spoke of. Your tone isn't small. Even if someone has it, would they be willing to exchange it with you? What do you have that would tempt them? The female cultivator sneered. Everything in the world depends on action. If Junior didn't come because he knew there were difficulties, how could I be worthy of Junior Martial Sister? Xiaohua said without hesitation, even if there's a sliver of a chance, Junior will come and try. After saying that, Xiaohua formed several hand seals on his body. A brilliant light flashed, and the protective magic weapon on Xiaohua's body flew out and fell into Xiaohua's hand. Junior is willing to use his most precious protective magic treasure to exchange for the heavenly Yin grass. Not bad. The quality of your magic treasure is indeed not bad. The female cultivator looked at it and asked, if you don't have it here, are you going to Meng Country's Immortal Ascension Gate? Exactly. Even if I have to go through Mo Zhao Black Forest, I still want to go to Meng Country to take a look. Xiaohua said resolutely. AI, not bad, you really are a hot-blooded youngster. The female cultivator sighed. She looked at Xiaohua and asked, have you taken a face-retaining spirit pill? Which aristocratic family is he from? Seeing that the female cultivator wanted to get to the bottom of things, Xiaohua had no choice but to answer. He smiled apologetically and said, Junior isn't a descendant of an aristocratic family. Before I entered the Imperial Thunder Sect, I was an itinerant cultivator. Junior definitely hasn't taken a face-retaining spirit pill. I'm afraid it's because I was fated to take a face-retaining spirit grass when I was young that I took a face-retaining spirit grass. Childhood? The female cultivator chuckled. You mean when you were 17 or 18 years old? Junior doesn't know. Junior used to be a rogue cultivator, so I don't know much. Therefore, whenever I come across something useful, I will try every possible means to take it. That year, it was because of Junior Martial Sister Xue's help that I sent people to Imperial Thunder Sect. Junior doesn't dare to let Junior Martial Sister Xue down. Xiaohua quickly repeated his previous words. Sure enough, the female cultivator nodded and said, it's good to know how to repay kindness with kindness. However, you came to the wrong place. Not only is Xie Zhiqian not here, the heavenly Yin grass is also not here. Xiaohua already had a premonition, but he was still disappointed. He looked at the female cultivator and said pitifully, I don't know which senior has the heavenly Yin grass. If Fairy can tell Junior, Junior will be endlessly grateful. Hee, you didn't know my burial flower manor before, right? The female cultivator didn't answer his question. Xiaohua braced himself and said with an apologetic smile, Junior's knowledge is shallow, I really don't know. The female cultivator raised her eyes and looked at Chun Kuei. Chun Kuei said with a smile, Xiaohua, listen well. My manor lord's name is Qin Yi. If you receive benefits from my manor lord, don't forget this name. You little girl, who told you to speak so much? Chen Yi rebuked, but her face didn't show any anger. Hee. Chun Kuei giggled and didn't speak anymore. You all can leave first. Chen Yi waved her hand and said, Yes. Chun Kuei and the others were a bit shocked. They all glanced at Xiaohua and slowly walked past Xiaohua from both sides and left Linlang Pavilion. Xiaohua was also a bit stunned. It was only the first time he saw Chen Yi. Moreover, she was a young and beautiful gold core cultivator. Chen Yi's actions made him very puzzled. Linlang Pavilion was abnormally quiet for a while. Although there was a cool breeze blowing from time to time, the incense was still straight up, not affected by the cool breeze at all. The faint fragrance didn't become stronger because the incense had been burning for a long time. It seemed to always be faint, just like Chen Yi's faint eyebrows. Xiaohua, have you always been in Thunderclap Palace? After a long while, Chen Yi seemed to be hesitating about something. Then she asked, according to what I know, when your Thunderclap sect's disciples have just entered the sect, they all have to cultivate in Thunderclap Palace, right? Xiaohua blinked and nodded. Just as Manor Lord said, it's exactly so. However, this junior is a loose cultivator and is quite ostracized by others. Therefore, when I entered the Thunderclap sect, I went to a remote place to find a medicine garden and didn't listen to lectures in Thunderclap Palace. Oh, so it's like that. Chen Yi was obviously a bit disappointed. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but stopped. After a long while, she seemed to be unwilling to give up and asked, Xiaohua, how many times have you been to Thunderclap Palace? Xiaohua's eyes turned slightly. Looking at Chen Yi's appearance, it was obvious that she wanted to inquire about something. However, thinking about his pitiful understanding of the Thunderclap sect, even if Chen Yi searched his soul, he couldn't possibly say anything, right? Therefore, Xiaohua calmly said, if Fairy Chen has something to ask, there's no harm in saying it. This junior is only a foundation-building disciple of Thunderclap Palace. As long as it doesn't involve the sect's secrets, this junior can answer anything. Actually, if it really is a secret, does Fairy Chen think that this junior, a loose cultivator, would know? Chen Yi rolled her eyes at him and said with obvious shyness, if I want to know the Thunderclap sect's secrets, would I still need to ask you? Forget it, Chen Yi sighed. Her bright eyes looked at the misty lake and said, tell me everything you've seen and heard in the Thunderclap sect. If you accept my goodwill, I'll tell you the whereabouts of the heavenly Yin grass. So simple? Xiaohua was stunned. You don't care about anything? And you only need to say it? Just treat it as relieving my boredom. Chen Yi turned her neck and said indifferently, if it was someone else, they would definitely be happy. It was just a trivial matter, so he could just say it. However, Xiaohua was different from others. Most of the matters in the Thunderclap sect were secrets. He didn't dare to casually say anything, even if it was something slightly related. Many intelligent people might be able to see through it. What if Chen Yi continued to ask? Wouldn't Xiaohua have to tell even more lies to cover it up? However, with the current situation, Xiaohua could not say it. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua smiled and said, if Manor Lord likes it, this junior will tell you everything about how I entered the Thunderclap sect. Chen Yi's voice was still indifferent. Thus, Xiaohua vividly described how he and Xue entered the Thunderclap sect together. Naturally, Xue became the main character who saved him. She was incomparably brave. At this moment, Chen Yi didn't show any reaction. She only listened quietly. Xiaohua panicked when he saw that Chen Yi wasn't interested. He pondered for a moment before he began to talk about the Feather Immortal gathering. When Xiaohua mentioned that Ancestor Zhen Qing was leading a team to the Feather Immortal gathering, Chen Yi's eyes lit up and the corners of her eyes twitched. However, her body was still lazy and Xiaohua didn't notice it. Soon after, Chen Yi's ears started to listen to Xiaohua. When Xiaohua saw that Chen Yi was interested in the Feather Immortal gathering, he naturally didn't hide anything. He explained everything that had nothing to do with him. It took him an hour to finish speaking. When Xiaohua was done, his mouth was dry. He looked at Chen Yi anxiously. Chen Yi's face was filled with joy. She waved her hand and said, Dong Jin, bring a cup of spiritual tea over. Not long after, Dong Jin came over with a jade plate with a cup of spiritual tea on it. Many thanks, fellow Taoist Dong Jin. Xiaohua smiled. He took the cup of spiritual tea and drank it in one gulp. Then he placed it back on the jade plate. Dong Jin wasn't like Chun Kuei. He didn't give Xiaohua any face. He took the jade plate and left. The spiritual tea turned into a strand of refreshing spiritual energy and merged into Xiao Hua's meridians. The previous irritation disappeared. Hee, that ancestor Zhen Qing of yours is quite interesting, Chen Yi said with a smile. He's already in the early stage of the Golden Core realm? Seeing that Chen Yi had a question, Xiao Hua hurriedly smiled and said, yes, ancestor Zhen Qing was already in the early stage of the Golden Core realm. I haven't seen him in all these years. I think he's already in the middle stage of the Golden Core realm? I hope so. Chen Yi shook her head slightly. You're only in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. There's still some distance between you and the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. How would you know how difficult it is to cultivate the Golden Core realm? We haven't seen each other for more than 10 years. Zhen Qing might not have made any progress. Ancestor Zhen Qing is such a good person. He's naturally protected by the heavenly Tao, Xiao Hua said with a smile. I was able to advance to the Foundation Establishment realm. Is it also thanks to ancestor Zhen Qing? Is it? Zhen Qing is a Golden Core realm cultivator. Why would he guide an aura-refining disciple like you? Chen Yi asked curiously. Could it be because of your outstanding performance at the Feather Immortal gathering? You saved that female cultivator called Sun Shu. Manor Lord is indeed wise. Xiao Hua praised. Ancestor Zhen Qing felt that I had helped him. Not long after I returned to the Imperial Thunder sect, he gave me some of the insights he had when he was condensing his golden core. Humph, meddlesome. Chen Yi sneered. How can the insights of a Golden Core realm cultivator be compared to the insights of a Foundation Establishment realm cultivator? This Zhen Qing only wants to return the favor. I'm afraid he'll make a mistake. Chapter 1977. Fortunately, I'm safe and sound. Xiao Hua said with a smile, I'm very grateful to Martial Uncle Zhen Qing from the bottom of my heart. And let me see the jade slip, Chen Yi said without any trace of politeness. Xiao Hua hesitated. This? Manor Lord, the jade slip is with me, but there are some secrets of my Imperial Thunder sect inside. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for Senior to look at it. Erase the secrets of your Imperial Thunder sect, Chen Yi said without hesitation. I just want to see the core condensation heart of your Imperial Thunder sect's Golden Core cultivator. This. Xiao Hua hesitated. That day, Zhen Qing told him not to spread it. Although he didn't make him swear, how could he take it out so easily? You only need to take out the jade slip. I won't look at your so-called Imperial Thunder sect's secrets and I'll tell you the whereabouts of the heavenly ingrass. Chen Yi said coldly, I'm also a Golden Core cultivator. Your martial uncle Zhen Qing is also a junior in front of me. What's there to be afraid of? Manor Lord, you're really forcing me. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. He was really at his wit's end. I promise I'll only look at it myself. I won't let anyone else see it. And I won't spread it, Chen Yi said with a smile. Won't spread it? How could it be that easy? Xiao Hua thought about his solemn vow that day. Now, he knew that it was easy to make a promise, but it was really difficult to do it. Sometimes, a heart oath was a good method. Martial Uncle, Junior is untalented. I'll return to the Imperial Thunder sect and ask Martial Uncle for forgiveness. Xiao Hua said in his heart, Manor Lord, can you swear a heart oath? And you won't spread it? Of course not. Chen Yi refused without any trace of politeness. This is a condition for you. What does it have to do with me? Forget it. Xiao Hua thought about it and really didn't want to give up such an opportunity. Even if he went to the Immortal Ascension sect, whether Xie Zhiqian would see him or not was two different matters. Xiao Hua felt that he should be flexible now. With that, Xiao Hua took out the jade slip and erased everything related to Taoist Master Lu Peng, leaving only Zhen Qing's pill condensation experience. Only then did he pass it to Chen Yi. You're a tactful person. Chen Yi laughed. However, you've gone back on your promise to your martial uncle. Sigh. There's no other way. Xiao Hua spread out his hands. For the sake of Junior Martial Sisters Foundation building, I'm willing to bear the punishment of breaking my promise. Once I return to the Imperial Thunder Sect, I'll ask Martial Uncle Zhen Qing for forgiveness. Chen Yi no longer paid attention to him. She only immersed her divine sense into the jade slip. In such a short period of time, she actually spent the time it took to eat a meal. If Xiaohua didn't know that she was a middle-stage gold core cultivator, he would definitely think that she was comprehending the secret method in front of him. However, right when Chen Yi withdrew her divine sense and raised her hand with the intention of returning the jade slip to Xiaohua, Chen Yi rolled her eyes and took out another jade slip with a flip of her hand. She closed her eyes for a moment before tossing the jade slip to Xiaohua and said, "This experience of core condensation is beneficial to my cultivation, so I'll take it for now. Take this jade slip, it'll be of use to you when you condense your core." "Ah? Master?" Xiaohua took the jade slip and said in surprise, "This? What is this?" Chen Yi unceremoniously took the jade slip and said, "Since you've already shown it to me, why can't I keep the jade slip? It's just the difference between 90 steps and 100 steps." Seeing Chen Yi put the jade slip away, what could Xiaohua say? He could only put away his own jade slip with a crying face. In his heart, he was thinking about how he should explain it to Zhen Qing. However, Chen Yi's actions naturally caused Xiaohua to be suspicious. But before he could think too much, Chen Yi said again, "Xiaohua, actually, I also don't know the whereabouts of the heavenly ingrass." Xiaohua was shocked. "Senior, what do you mean?" Junior took the jade slip and cough. Chen Yi revealed a displeased expression and said indifferently, "Wait for me to finish speaking." Xiaohua was indeed angry and could only smile apologetically. Junior was impatient. "Senior, please don't blame me." And Chen Yi nodded. "Actually, even if you went to the Immortal Ascension sect and Xie Zhiqian was willing to see you, he wouldn't tell you the whereabouts of the heavenly ingrass. Because or rather, we didn't even go." "Ah? It can't be." Xiaohua was flabbergasted, but then his face revealed a hint of joy. He said, "This was something that happened 4 years ago?" This junior thought that seniors had already returned. "Who knew that? You still hadn't gone." What do you know?" Chen Yi said coldly. "It's only been 4 years. When we went to look for spiritual herbs, it took more than 10 years just to prepare. Don't talk about this. The location is. Moreover, it's a very important matter." "What is 4 years?" Chen Yi's words were vague and she didn't say the location. "You've already prepared for 4 years and it's still not ready?" Xiaohua was surprised. Although he had prepared for several adventures, it definitely didn't take this long. Chen Yi looked up at Xiaohua as if she was thinking about something. She said casually, "This matter has been prepared for many years. Xie Zhiqian went to the Flame Forest swamp to look for the last item. It should have been prepared 4 years ago. But why hasn't there been any news for 4 years? It's because I'm not the person in charge, so I don't know." Xiaohua frowned when he heard this. Seeing this, Chen Yi said with a smile, "Don't worry. Although it's just a guess, it might be inside. If it's really there, I'll take it out. You can use your protective treasure to exchange it with me. I won't let you down." Thank you, Senior." Xiaohua bowed and said, "Everything depends on Senior's guidance." No need." Chen Yi waved her hand. "Your protective treasure is also not bad. It's the same value as the heavenly ingrass. And I still have to tell you in advance. If it's not there or I can't take it out, our deal can't be done." "Yes, this junior understands." Xiaohua looked at Chen Yi's young face. He knew that she was an old woman who was hundreds of years old. She couldn't be like him and recklessly stand up for some inexplicable matter. "Then Junior will take his leave. When there's news about the heavenly ingrass, I ask Senior to send a message to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Or Junior will come here to find Senior after training." Xiaohua bowed and said, Wait for my message." Chen Yi said with a smile. Xiaohua felt uneasy in his heart. However, seeing that Chen Yi didn't welcome him to Buried Flower Manor, he could only reluctantly nod and say, "I hope Senior will remember this matter." "You brat." Chen Yi immediately heard Xiaohua's tone. She sneered and said, how can a golden core cultivator's words not count? If you're willing, you can come here to find my buried flower manor after training. Chapter 1978. Junior doesn't dare. Junior has offended Senior. Xiaohua panicked and hurriedly apologized. Chen Yi waved her sleeves and ordered, Dongjin, bring 3 cups of snow wine and invite Xiaohua to drink. When Xiaohua heard it was spiritual wine again, he hurriedly waved his hand. Senior, thank you for your kindness. Junior doesn't like the taste of spiritual wine. How could I take advantage of you? When Chen Yi called him old, Xiaohua felt awkward. However, he understood that Chen Yi took Zhen Qing's jade strip and felt burdened, so she used the spiritual wine to repay him. As she spoke, Dong Jin, who was dressed in snow-white clothes, held a jade tray in her hand. There were 3 jade cups the size of fists on the tray, and they were filled with spirit wine that was almost transparent. She had yet to drink it, but a cold and intoxicating fragrance wafted into her nose. This snow wine is one of the 4 great spiritual wines of my burial flower manor. If female cultivators drink it, they'll always be youthful. What about male cultivators? I don't know its effects. However, it definitely won't intoxicate people. Chen Yi said with a smile. She looked as cute as a little junior sister. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He smiled apologetically and said, Can Junior bring this spiritual wine to Junior sister? Chen Yi waved her sleeves. It's for you to drink. All right. Xiaohua was helpless. He could only reach out and pick up the jade cup. When his fingers touched the jade cup, a cold sensation pierced his finger bones. Good heavens! It's so cold, but the spiritual wine didn't freeze? Moreover, if it enters the stomach, won't the 5 viscera and 6 bowels all turn to ice? Although Xiaohua thought so, he didn't dare to be negligent. He raised his head and poured the spiritual wine into his mouth. Then he wrapped it with his true essence. Xiaohua felt an incomparably cold stream enter his stomach. Then, it turned into countless streams that flowed to his limbs and veins. In an instant, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly used earth expansion to slowly refine the ice-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the spiritual wine. When the spiritual energy was completely refined, a feeling of breaking out of a cocoon and seeing spring and winter appeared in his meridians. It continuously spread to his limbs and bones. After several breaths, it stopped. Then, a lively feeling rose in his lower dantian. How is it? Chen Yi asked with a smile. Is it comparable to your jade slip? Xiaohua looked inside his body for a moment, and with a smile on his face, he said apologetically, This is indeed the famous wine of Burial Flower Manor. Junior will be exempted from half a month of bitter cultivation. It's good that you know. Chen Yi snorted. Why aren't you drinking it? Yes, Xiaohua replied and drank the 2 cups of wine separately. At this moment, Chun Kuei hurriedly walked in and said somewhat fearfully, reporting to Manor Lord, This servant has bad news. Okay, go ahead. Chen Yi was obviously in a good mood. She raised her eyebrows and said, This. Spring Kuei hesitated a little. The youth-retaining grass in the spring garden? Ah? What's wrong with the youth-retaining grass? Chen Yi's eyes widened when she heard this. She said angrily, Hurry up and tell me why you're stuttering. Plop. Chun Kuei knelt down on the ground and said loudly with her head on the ground, Manor Lord, please understand. It's all because this servant was not strict enough. That youth-retaining grass seems to have been contaminated by poisonous saliva. I'm afraid it won't work. What? Useless thing. Chen Yi was furious. She stood up and waved her hand. Papa. She slapped Chun Kuei's face twice. When did this happen? Why did you only come to report now? I've always treated you well and you're also the head of the 4 servants. Isn't it because the youth-retaining grass is in the spring garden? If anything happens to the youth-retaining grass, I'll immediately take your life. Manor Lord, please understand. It's about what happened just now. Chun Kuei, who was only in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, didn't dare to resist. With a bitter face, she said in a low voice, "This servant also just received a report from a servant. Moreover, my burial flower manor hasn't opened the restriction for a full 5 years." Chen Yi's cold and angry gaze swept over Xiaohua. Xiaohua, who had just finished drinking the spirit wine, felt Chen Yi's gaze. With a helpless expression, he said with a bitter smile, "Junior can swear that I absolutely have nothing to do with this matter. Junior also doesn't dare to leave the manor right now. Let's wait until Senior's matter comes to light." Chen Yi coldly snorted and said, "You better have nothing to do with this matter. Otherwise, you'll definitely regret going against me." Seeing Chen Yi's face change in an instant, Xiaohua's heart was filled with an indescribable feeling. There was only panic on his face. "Xiaolan." Chen Yi slowly walked out and ordered, "Take Xiaohua away and arrange a place to rest. Have someone take good care of him." "Yes, this servant understands." Xiaolan, who was dressed in red, no longer had the previous smile on her face. She replied very fearfully. After Chen Yi quickly left Linlang Pavilion, Xiaolan turned her head and said, "Come with me." "Yes," Xiaohua responded and also followed Xiaolan out of Linlang Pavilion. There were many waterside pavilions around Linlang Pavilion. They all seemed to be places to rest. However, Xiaolan didn't stop. She only took Xiaohua out of the restriction and went along the small bridge to the lake. On the shore, Hai Tang and Plum Blossom weren't there. Xiaolan also didn't send any communication talismans. She only stood there for a moment. Immediately, 2 female cultivators in the early stage of foundation establishment quickly walked over and bowed. "Greetings, milord. This is the manor master's honored guest. You must treat him well. You are not allowed to walk around the manor as you please." Xiaolan coldly ordered. "Yes, this servant understands." The 2 female cultivators' faces were slightly shocked. They both bowed and answered. Afterwards, Xiaolan ignored Xiaohua. She turned around and walked towards the other side of the lake. Xiaohua, on the other hand, followed the 2 female cultivators in another direction. After walking for half a cup of tea's time, they arrived in front of an exquisite pavilion. The female cultivator didn't open any restriction, but just pushed the door open. She raised her hand and said, "Fellow Taoist, please." Thank you, fellow Taoists." Xiaohua naturally knew that Burial Flower Manor was within a formation. This small pavilion was destined to set up another restriction. After Xiaohua entered the pavilion, the 2 female cultivators didn't leave. They stood on both sides of the pavilion in silence. Xiaohua used his divine sense to scan the entire pavilion. He didn't find anything strange, so he sighed and sat down. He was clear in his heart that he wasn't in a cage right now. It was better for him to obediently follow Chen Yi's arrangements. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to escape suspicion and might even lose his life here. First, it was eldest senior apprentice brother's Thunder Beast inner core. I had no choice but to seek out Uncle Master Zhen Yi. I risked being killed by a golden core cultivator at any time to fight for it. Fortunately, I had Uncle Master Zhen Yi as my backer, so others gave me some face. At that time, I was only a little chi refinement cultivator, so I was able to get some scraps. And eldest senior brother can be considered to be lucky. In the end, this Xiao picked up a loophole and helped eldest senior brother obtain the inner core. This time, for Xue Xue, I had no choice but to come to this Burial Flower Manor that I've never heard of. This female cultivator named Chen Yi is actually at the middle stage of the Golden Core realm. Even Xie Zhiqian is willing to be her lackey. I'm afraid I won't be as lucky as last time. I have to be careful about everything. Once Chen Yi finds out who the culprit is, I'll leave as soon as possible. Once they find the heavenly ingrass, I'll just exchange my protective magic treasure with them. However, those who can tamper with Burial Flower Manor are certainly not ordinary people. How could Chen Yi find the culprit so easily? I'm afraid it won't be easy for me to leave. Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. I wonder if Xue Xue has already arrived at Haoming City? I'll just consider myself unlucky and cultivate. I'm afraid there won't be any results even after 8 to 10 days. However, contrary to Xiaohua's expectations, Just an hour later, the two female cultivators guarding the door pushed open the door and entered. They faintly said, "Fellow Taoist, please follow me to Mujing Garden. The Manor Lord has something to ask you." This is bad. When Xiaohua heard Chen Yi call him over, he naturally knew it wasn't good. The youth retaining grass tainted by the poisonous saliva must have something to do with him. If it wasn't related, Chen Yi definitely wouldn't have thought of him. Sure enough, after the two female cultivators left the pavilion, walked across the lake, and arrived at a bamboo garden surrounded by a gurgling stream protected by layers upon layers of great formations. Xiaohua saw many female cultivators of varying cultivation levels standing around the bamboo garden. Most of them were at the aura refining realm, and each of them held their breaths and condensed their qi. Without waiting for Xiaohua to approach, an early-stage foundation establishment female cultivator blocked the three of them and said in a low voice, "Junior Martial Sisters, who is this? How can he approach Mujing Garden?" One of the female cultivators took out a command tablet and answered in a low voice, reporting to Senior Martial Sister Tao Hua, "This is a cultivator who entered my burial flower manor today. The Manor Lord sent a message asking him to come in for questioning." Tao Hua took the command tablet, looked at it for a moment, and handed it back to the female cultivator. She nodded and said, "Wait a moment." After she finished speaking, she clapped her hands, and a flower branch appeared in her hand. On it, thumb-sized peach blossoms were about to bloom. Tao Hua urged her magic power, and the peach blossoms on the flower branch broke free from the branch. They spiraled in the air and gradually converged into a large peach blossom. Soon after, they flew back into the bamboo forest behind Tao Hua. With a whoosh, a burst of fragrance, the bamboo in the bamboo forest slowly separated, and a small path appeared in the crisscrossing light and shadow. Tao Hua looked at Xiaohua and coldly said, "Fellow Taoist, please follow me." "Thank you for your trouble, fellow Taoist." Xiaohua's expression didn't look good. Tao Hua raised her eyebrows and looked at Xiaohua with some astonishment. However, she didn't say anything and turned around and stepped into the small path in the bamboo forest. The small path in the bamboo forest was actually very long, and there were many forks in the path. After walking for a while, Xiaohua came to realize that this bamboo forest was definitely a maze. It seemed that Chen Yi really treasured the beauty-retaining grass. This treasure of hers had a problem, and it was because of Xiaohua's arrival. The deeper Xiaohua went into the bamboo forest, the colder his heart became. After walking for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, in front of a thin bamboo that didn't seem to have an exit, the peach blossom swayed, and his figure rushed into the thin bamboo, disappearing. Xiaohua sighed. He could only brace himself and walk in. Chapter 1979. Xiaohua only felt a slight blur in front of his eyes as if he had passed through a restriction. When he raised his head to look again, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Originally, Xiaohua had already felt that the spiritual qi of heaven and earth was abundant in Burial Flower Manor. It was the first time he had seen something like this in his life. However, when he set foot in Mujing Garden, he knew that he was wrong. Not to mention the refreshing air that assaulted his face, the abundant spiritual qi of heaven and earth was abnormally lively. His eyes were filled with the brilliant spring scenery, the joyous cries of birds, the flowing water of a small stream, the lush flowers, the emerald green, and the hundreds of flowers competing in beauty. It made him feel as if he had walked into another world. Damn it, the spring flower is named after spring. The Mujing Garden that she is in charge of is naturally dominated by spring. This place uses great magic power and illusions to create a spring scene. Summer, autumn, and winter, aren't they all different places? This Burial Flower Manor. How many secular people are envious of this place? Xiaohua didn't dare to use his divine sense too much. He only used his bright eyes to look around. In Xiaohua's eyes, all kinds of spirit grasses were divided into two categories. One was those that existed in the space, and the other was naturally those that didn't exist in the space. Although Tao Hua didn't turn her head to look at him, her divine sense had always been paying attention to the back. Seeing Xiaohua's astonishment, She had long despised him in her heart. She slightly swayed her hips and brought Xiaohua through a field of spiritual flowers that looked like morning glories. They arrived at a place where a small stream crossed. She stopped and bowed, saying, "Manor Lord, this servant has brought this fellow Taoist here." Humph! A sharp cold snort sounded from the other side of the stream. Then, on the other side of the stream, where the space was, there was a slight distortion. It was as if a layer of gauze was lifted, revealing a jade-like medicinal field. "Xiaohua, come in." Chen Yi's voice sounded. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly walked into the medicinal field and saw that it was about 1 mu of land. The ground was emerald green, and it was filled with the best quality water-type spiritual stones. Around the water-type spiritual stones, there were several piles of yellow soil. In the soil, there were several thin and weak-looking spiritual herbs. The spirit grass was not even as tall as a palm. When it pulled out a few slender stems from its roots, it looked no different from ordinary grass. However, at this moment, the green slender stems of the spirit grass were covered with pitch-black fine lines, as if it was stained with ink. Beside the spiritual grass, Chen Yi's face was ashen. Her eyes seemed to be about to spit fire as she stared at Xiaohua. Beside Chen Yi, Chun Kuei was kneeling on the ground. Her eyes were red and her face was pale. Xia Lan and the others were also standing behind Chun Kuei, their eyes flashing with fear. They did not have the calmness of a middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator. There were also 3 or 4 older female cultivators beside him. They were all at the late stage of foundation establishment. At this moment, they were all frowning as they looked at the spirit herb. Occasionally, they would whisper to each other, but their eyes were filled with confusion. Not far from the spirit herb, a female cultivator dressed in pink robes was lying on the ground. Her limbs were curled up, and she was clearly lifeless. "Bitter." Xiaohua quickly withdrew his gaze and obediently walked in front of Chen Yi. He bowed and said, "Greetings, Manor Lord." "I wonder why Manor Lord called this little one over?" Chen Yi's gaze coldly swept over Xiaohua, as if she wanted to see through him. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, she asked, "Xiaohua, do you know Sun Qian?" "Sun Qian?" Xiaohua was stunned. He blankly shook his head and said, "Junior does not know Sun Qian. I have never heard of such a name." "Swear a heart oath," Chen Yi said without any trace of politeness. It was as if she would immediately search Xiaohua's soul if he did not swear a heart oath. How could Xiaohua dare to be negligent? He hurriedly swore a vicious heart oath. Only then did he smile apologetically and said, "Manor Lord, Junior really has nothing to do with this matter. This is the first time Junior has heard of Burial Flower Manor, and I am also a small foundation establishment cultivator. How could I dare to covet this? Beauty-retaining grass?" Chen Yi's heart stirred. She asked, "When you were a loose cultivator, did you take this kind of spirit grass? Do you have any impression of it? Where did you take it?" "Good, let Manor Lord know, this Junior really doesn't have any impression of it. If Manor Lord didn't remind me, how would this Junior know that this is the beauty-retaining grass?" Xiaohua bitterly smiled. "This beauty-retaining grass is no different from ordinary grass." "Manor Lord." At this moment, the whispering old women stopped talking. One of them walked forward and said, "Forgive us for being incompetent. This is a mixture of several kinds of beast poisons. It was originally a mixture of poisonous saliva that was specially used to deal with cultivators. I don't know what it was mixed with, but it actually had an effect on the beauty-retaining grass. Moreover, this poisonous saliva seems to have no effect on other spirit grasses. It seems that someone has been plotting for a long time. Although we can detoxify the poison, those detoxification methods may not work on this mixture of beast poisons. If there is an accident, the beauty-retaining grass will definitely not survive. Elder Mu, how confident are you?" Chen Yi's expression became even more gloomy as she whispered, "This." Elder Mu turned his head and exchanged glances with the others. He bitterly smiled and said, "I'm afraid there is not even a 10% chance." "You wait." Chen Yi was obviously anxious. She was about to get angry, But when the words came out, she restrained herself. We have failed Manor Lord's trust. Elder Mu's tone became gloomy again. We study the spirit grass technique, mostly on how to grow and how to reproduce. Even when we detoxify, it is only wood attribute poison. Beast poisons are really rare. Therefore, we did not dare to try. Promise. Forget it. That bitch has been dealing with me for many years. She already knew that this beauty-retaining grass is the root of Zhonghua Manor. She deliberately wanted to destroy this spirit grass. Her methods are not inferior to yours, so I don't blame you. Chen Yi looked around and saw the 5 beauty-retaining grasses in the medicine garden. She waved her hand and said, I still need to rely on you to detoxify the poison. You all should study it carefully first. In the end, if there is really no way, then try again. Yes, we will continue to look. Elder Mu bowed and said, but when she turned around and looked at the female cultivators who were also elders, she still had a helpless expression on her face. In fact, there was even a hint of excitement in her helplessness. Xiao Hua listened on the side and his heart unconsciously moved. His eyes turned a few times and he was a little hesitant. He naturally thought of the secret detoxification method that he occasionally learned from Tianmen Mountain's Huang family a few years ago. However, he had only used it on people and had never used it on spirit grass. Moreover, if he spoke now, Chen Yi would probably be suspicious, right? However, if he did not speak now, when the poisonous saliva penetrated even deeper into the beauty-retaining grass, even the method of fighting poison with poison would not work, right? Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Chen Yi coldly say, Come, take away this bitch's corpse. She has no reason to put it here and dirty my eyes. Dong Jin responded. With a wave of her hand, she took the female cultivator's corpse lying on the ground and quickly walked out of the medicine garden. Chen Yi's gaze fell on Chun Kuei again. Chapter 1980. Lowly servant. You can't even do such a small thing properly. How dare I treat you so well? Chun Kuei hurriedly kowtowed and cried, It's all my fault. I was careless. I only thought that nothing would happen in the past few decades, so... As she spoke, she was already choking with sobs. Her forehead was already bleeding from the hard spirit stone. You only regret after something happened. Chen Yi said angrily, What were you doing earlier? If the beauty-retaining grass can't save her, you lowly servants of the Spring Division will die. Yes, I know. Chun Kuei kowtowed again, blood flowing down her face. It's all my fault. The other sisters have nothing to do with the beauty-retaining grass. Please spare their lives. How many spirit stones are their lives worth? Even if they die 10,000 times, they can't be compared to my 5 stalks of beauty-retaining grass. Chen Yi said coldly. Chun Kuei still didn't dare to stop kowtowing. More blood flowed down her face. Villa Master. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and bowed. Junior has something to say. Is it possible? What did you think of? Do you have an impression of that slut? Chen Yi coldly glanced at Xiao Hua. Her gaze almost pierced through Xiao Hua's body. Alright, Villa Master knows. Junior really doesn't know Sun Qian, let alone have seen her before. Xiao Hua smiled apologetically. However, Junior knows a secret method to cure poison with poison. What? You can cure the poison of the beauty-retaining grass? Chen Yi said unexpectedly. The 5 elders of my burial flower manor didn't dare to say anything. Yes, Junior also doesn't dare to confirm. Xiao Hua said embarrassedly, Moreover, this secret method has only been used on cultivators. It has never been used on spirit herbs. However, since it's a secret method, it can be tried. It's better than being helpless. But what? Chen Yi frowned. But Junior has scruples in his heart. I'm afraid Senior will misunderstand Junior. It's already premeditated. Xiao Hua really couldn't escape, so he could only calmly say, It's good that you didn't say it. Now that you say it, there's really such a possibility. Chen Yi sneered and said, If you didn't come to my burial flower manor, my 5 beauty-retaining grass would be fine. But when you came, they were tainted by the poisonous saliva. Moreover, you have a ready-made antidote. How can you not make me think this way? Sigh, that's right. This junior knows as well. Xiaohua smiled apologetically and said, but if I don't detoxify the poison now, after a long time, there won't be any medicine that can cure it. Junior should also, that's right. Chen Yi sneered. Since even Chun Kuei couldn't survive, how could you? That would be a joke. Xiaohua didn't have the time to resent his bad luck. He cupped his hands and said, then this junior was also forced into a corner. I can only force myself to try. And how confident are you? Chen Yi looked at Xiaohua from head to toe and asked. Junior is not as knowledgeable as the elders. I only have a rough understanding of spiritual herbs. Xiaohua shook his head and said, moreover, I'm not good at using poison or detoxification. I'm just trying my luck with that secret technique. I don't have any confidence at all. Then you should stand aside first. Chen Yi sneered, how could my burial flower manor's beauty-retaining grass be the grass that you tried? Xiaohua didn't expect Chen Yi to flatly refuse, and his face was very embarrassed. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Chen Yi looked at the elders who were whispering and asked, elders, how is it going? In my opinion, if we don't make a move now, I'm afraid the beauty-retaining grass will be hopeless. Yes, we will make a move now. Elder Mu slowly nodded and said, this little friend's method of fighting poison with poison is quite novel. However, I don't dare to try it. That method is really dangerous. Either it succeeds or it fails miserably. After saying that, Elder Mu clapped her hand and took out a thumb-sized jade bottle from her storage bag. She grabbed it with her hand, and a ball of light red jade liquid flew out from the jade bottle. Then, with a flick of her hand, the jade liquid flew above the beauty-retaining grass. Sisters, Elder Mu lightly reprimanded, just do as I said just now and follow the steps. We will listen to Fellow Mu's instructions. The four of them softly responded. Fellow Shuer and Fellow Chen, go first. Elder Mu instructed. Two of the female cultivators stepped forward, each extended their left palm, and their hands slowly formed an extremely complicated seal. When their hands became extremely heavy, they opened their mouths and a trace of dark red blood essence flew into the air. Go. The two female cultivators flipped their hands, and the seal was precisely on the blood essence. The blood essence turned into two small nets and fell on top of the jade liquid. The jade liquid trembled for a while, and 30% of it separated from the jade liquid and fell on top of the blood essence net towards the beauty-retaining grass. A light sound, like hot water falling on snow, actually produced a burst of pitch-black smoke. Good, Fellow Mo, Fellow Min quickly. Elder Mu was overjoyed when she saw this and immediately urged. The other two female cultivators also didn't dare to be negligent and did the same thing. Sure enough, a layer of smoke flew up, but this time it was clearly much less. Seeing that there was still 30% of the jade liquid left, Elder Mu had already formed a seal and hid it on top of the jade liquid. However, before the jade liquid fell on the beauty-retaining grass, the beauty-retaining grass trembled for a while. The pitch-black veins that had faded just now suddenly became darker, and there were a few strands of yellow in the pitch-black veins. Bad, Elder Mu blurted out. She rubbed her hands again, and waves of magic power hit the jade liquid. Unfortunately, when the jade liquid landed on the beauty-retaining grass this time, not only did it not create a layer of smoke, but the black color of the beauty-retaining grass became even darker. It was even worse than before. The leaves of the beauty-retaining grass slowly drooped down, gradually turning yellow and black. It was obvious that it could no longer live. Villa Master. Seeing this, Elder Mu was a little dumbfounded and explained, I and the others. I'm afraid it's beyond our power. This mixed poison is too strange. The detoxification method can only remove one layer, but it can't remove the other layer, and it may even add fuel to the fire of the other layer. Say no more. Chen Yi's face was extremely ugly. She stared at the dying beauty-retaining grass, and her eyes flashed with malice, as if she was about to lose control of her emotions. Xiaohua. Almost at the same time, Chen Yi opened her mouth, You go and try. But Xiaohua hesitated. He was afraid that if he couldn't detoxify it, Qin Yi's anger would be all over him, and he would lose his life in an instant. Hurry up, Chen Yi said fiercely, unless you don't want to live now. Looking at Qin Yi's fierceness that was stronger than her pressure, Xiaohua shrunk his neck and didn't dare to say anything. He quickly walked to the same beauty-retaining grass in the distance, and with a wave of his hand, he took out a bottle of green python's venom from the space. What is this? Qin Yi's voice followed. Green python's venom. Xiaohua didn't dare to hide and quickly answered. Qin Yi snorted and didn't comment. Seeing that Qin Yi didn't speak, Xiaohua closed his eyes and calmed his heart. He grabbed a drop of venom from the jade bottle, and then, just like how he detoxified the cultivators on Tianmen Mountain, he divided it into 9 drops and used a secret technique to put them into the beauty-retaining grass. Although Xiaohua couldn't use his divine sense to observe it like how he detoxified the cultivator's poison, he had detoxified so many cultivators' poisons, and he also saw Elder Mu and the others' detoxification just now, so he had some idea in his heart. He stared at the appearance of the beauty-retaining grass, and his divine sense also wrapped around the beauty-retaining grass, carefully observing the changes of the beauty-retaining grass. As expected, the poisonous saliva was really complicated. Just as Elder Mu had predicted, one poison was within another, and one poison was a counter to the other. If he were to use antidotes, he would end up in the same situation as Elder Mu. The antidote would always rush towards the incendiary material of the other poison. However, Xiaohua's method of using poison to restrain poison was just right. No matter what poison it was restrained by the green python's venom. In addition, the secret technique was indeed somewhat mysterious, and the results could be seen in minute details. The cereal poison in the beauty-retaining grass could be said to have been detoxified in Xiaohua's hands. On the surface of the beauty-retaining grass, the pitch-black color was constantly changing, and every time it changed, the pitch-black color was reduced by a bit. When the 9 drops of the green python's venom were used up, the pitch-black color on the beauty-retaining grass was already cleared. Although it was still slightly gloomy, it was obvious that the beauty-retaining grass was alive. Great! Chen Yi couldn't help but clap her hands and say, Xiaohua, you've done a great service. Alas, Xiaohua smiled bitterly, straightened up, and said with an apologetic smile, as long as Manor Master spares this junior's life. Don't doubt this junior's intentions. Ha! Qin Yi laughed. You're just a little foundation establishment. What intentions can you have? Why would this old one be afraid of your intentions? Yes, as long as senior understands. Xiaohua somewhat understood. This junior will continue to work hard and detoxify the remaining 3 stalks. Good. If you succeed in one try, I will reward you handsomely. Chen Yi nodded, and the faces of Chen Kuei and the others were also filled with joy. Needless to say, their lives were saved. Xiaohua wiped the sweat on his forehead with his hand. He wasn't tired, but he was afraid that there would be an accident. Xiaohua's heart tightened. Soon after, in less than 2 hours, the poison of the other 3 stalks of beauty-retaining grass was detoxified by Xiaohua. When all of the poisonous saliva was cleared, Xiaohua let out a long breath, bowed and said, Manor Master, this junior was fortunate enough to not disappoint you. Good. Chen Yi waved her hand, and said to Elder Mu and the others, Wait and see, how is this beauty-retaining grass? Good, Manor Master will know. Elder Mu's face was slightly red, and she said in a low voice, Previously, fellow Taoist Xiao was the first to detoxify the beauty-retaining grass. This old one and the others have already seen it. Although it hasn't returned to normal, it's no longer a big problem. Now, this old one and the others don't dare to do anything more. After a few days, let the beauty-retaining grass recover by itself, and use some methods to imbue it with spiritual energy. It should be able to completely recover. Good. Chen Yi looked at Xiaohua and said with a smile, Your merits make up for your faults. It can be considered as complementing each other. Many thanks for Manor Master's kindness in not pursuing this matter. Xiaohua let out a long breath. Chen Kuei, clean up the dead beauty-retaining grass. I want to reactivate the array here. In the future, without my Dharma tablet, no one can come in at will. Chen Yi waved her hand and ordered Chun Kuei. To be continued. Chapter 1981. Yes, this servant will do it right away. Chun Kuei's face showed joy as she immediately got up from the ground and said. Xiaohua's heart moved as he cupped his hands and said, Villa Master, since this face-retaining grass is already dead, can you give it to this junior? This junior also wants to see what the poisonous saliva is. This. Chen Yi was somewhat hesitant as she glanced at Elder Mu. Elder Mu slightly nodded, indicating that the face-retaining grass had already lost its vitality. Even if Xiaohua took it, it would be useless. And it's rare for you to have such thoughts. How can this old one not satisfy you? Chen Yi waved her hand and said with a smile, Chun Kuei, give the face-retaining grass to Xiaohua. Yes. Chun Kuei knew what Chen Yi was thinking. She took out the beauty-retaining grass from the yellow soil and didn't give it to Xiaohua. Instead, with a wave of her hand, she cut off the part that wasn't in the soil and gave it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua saw that Chen Yi was so vigilant, he bitterly smiled as he took it and put it into his space. All of you leave. Chen Yi's divine sense swept through the medicine garden as she coldly ordered. Everyone didn't dare to be negligent as they all retreated from the medicine garden. Xiaohua stood in front of the bamboo forest as he watched the bamboo in the bamboo forest continuously change. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth also changed a lot along with the movement of the formation. However, Xiaohua currently had a deep understanding of formations. Just from the changes of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, he could already faintly perceive the power of the formation and some traces of it. After a meal, Chen Yi came out of the bamboo forest. Her face had already recovered the innocence that Xiaohua had when he first saw her, and even a little shy. Let's go. If I'm not wrong, if Sun Qian comes to Mujing Garden again, she will definitely be discovered by me, hee. Chen Yi said as she waved her hand, Xiaohua, you also come. Xiaohua didn't dare to disobey and followed Chen Yi and the others to Linlang Pavilion. Come, Xiaohua. Chen Yi waved her hand and said, this time, you were able to save my buried flower villa's face-retaining grass, so I can't not toast you 3 times. As she spoke, Chun Kuei and Dong Jin also took out 3 fist-sized jade cups and said with a smile, fellow Taoist Xiao, this matter is all thanks to you. Let me toast you 3 times on behalf of the villa master. Xiaohua extended his hand to receive it, then bowed towards Chen Yi, many thanks for Manor Lord's generous gift. This junior was also taking a risk, but I was actually breaking out in a cold sweat earlier. Chen Yi smiled faintly. She looked very pure and lovely, far less terrifying than when she was angry earlier. After Xiaohua finished drinking the 3 cups of spirit wine, which was quite different from the Snow Jean spirit wine from before, Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, it must be because the heavens have taken care of Manor Lord's usual benevolence. Knowing that something would happen in the manor today, this junior was specially sent here. Hee, you really know how to talk. Chen Yi covered her mouth with her hand and laughed. Since the youth-retaining grass is fine, it can be considered that Junior's grievance has been washed away. Xiaohua continued, Junior still has some matters to attend to. When I have the whereabouts of the heavenly yin grass, please send me a message. And don't worry about the heavenly yin grass. I will definitely keep an eye out for you. Chen Yi said with a smile, however, that protective magic treasure of yours. Speaking of which, I don't really like it. Didn't senior previously? Xiaohua was somewhat flabbergasted. He didn't know why Chen Yi went back on her words. Hee, I suddenly want to make a deal with you. Chen Yi said with a smile. Xiaohua frowned, and a bad feeling emerged from the bottom of his heart. Sure enough, Chen Yi quickly uncovered the mystery. Your secret technique of fighting poison with poison is pretty good. I feel that it's more suitable than any protective magic treasure. You might as well use that secret technique to exchange for the heavenly yin grass. Xiaohua thought for a moment, then nodded and said, okay. As long as senior can find the heavenly yin grass, this junior can use this secret technique to exchange with senior. Hee, I want to get the jade slip of the secret technique right now. Chen Yi said with a smile, or you can stay in my burial flower manor and wait for me to find the heavenly ingrass. Otherwise, without this secret technique, I don't have any confidence. Xiaohua was really in a difficult position. Firstly, he was somewhat afraid of this female cultivator whose mood was fickle and unpredictable. Secondly, this female cultivator seemed to be somewhat greedy. He had a lot of secrets, and this secret technique of fighting poison with poison was nothing. If she discovered something, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to leave Burial Flower Manor. However, if he were to take out the secret technique for nothing, it would make Xiaohua's heart ache. Moreover, Chen Yi didn't have full confidence in getting the heavenly ingrass. If she couldn't get the heavenly ingrass in the future, how could he get back the value of the secret technique? Forget it. After pondering for a moment, Xiaohua sighed cautiously. Lord Manor is a golden core stage senior, so this junior definitely believes in you. This secret technique, junior will give it to senior in advance. I hope senior can gather the heavenly ingrass as much as possible. As Xiaohua expected, Chen Yi beamed with joy and waved her hand. Look at what you're saying. Why would a golden core stage cultivator like me care about your secret technique? How about this? You can stay in my burial flower manor for the time being. When I find the heavenly ingrass, I'll trade with you. There's no need. Xiaohua hurriedly and sincerely said, this junior sincerely wants to give this secret technique to senior. If I didn't give this secret technique to senior in advance, I'm afraid senior won't do your best. Nonsense. Chen Yi's small nose slightly wrinkled, and she scolded with a smile. Just based on that jade slip of yours, I won't do my best. At this moment, Chen Yi frowned slightly, and her eyes slightly raised, looking to the right of Xiaohua. Could it be? Xiaohua was shocked, thinking that Sun Qian, who Chen Yi mentioned, had appeared in Glittering Jewel's pavilion. However, soon after, a gust of wind blew past, as if Chen Yi had used some secret technique, and the surrounding spiritual qi of heaven and earth gathered. Invite fellow Taoist Zhu in. Chen Yi said softly. Soon after, Chen Yi waved her hand, and a brilliance flew out from her sleeve, dispersing the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. She smiled at Xiaohua and said, your luck has come. What do you mean? Xiaohua didn't understand, but he had a premonition in his heart. Fellow Taoist Zhu Qinghe of Meng Country's Su Yan faction is also one of the participants of this operation. He suddenly came to my burial flower manor this time, and I'm afraid it's related to this operation. Chen Yi explained with a smile, you can leave first, don't be in a hurry to leave. Wait for me to welcome fellow Taoist Zhu, and see if it's time for the operation. If so, you can leave after I get the heavenly ingrass. That's great, thank you senior. Xiaohua was overjoyed and he bowed to thank her. You're welcome, Chen Yi said with a wave of her sleeve. However, just as Xiaohua was about to leave Glittering Jewel's pavilion, Chen Yi shouted, Xiaohua, you are leaving just like that? Xiaohua was stunned, and then he smiled bitterly in his heart. This Chen, where does she have the bearing of a golden core realm senior? The heavenly ingrass. I'm afraid it's hard to count on it. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote. Chapter 1982. Soon after, Xiaohua pretended to come to a sudden realization as he slapped his forehead and said, look at this junior's memory. I was just thinking about taking out the jade slip, but I was immediately overjoyed when I heard the good news. I've embarrassed myself in front of senior. Then he took out a jade slip, recorded the secret technique, and handed it to Chen Yi. Chen Yi's divine sense swept over and nodded. Not bad, I appreciate your kind intentions. After he finished speaking, he no longer paid any attention to Xiaohua. He stood up and walked away. Presumably, he was going to welcome Su Yan faction's Zhu Qinghe. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please follow me. Seeing that Xiaohua was somewhat in a daze, Chun Kuei reminded him. Many thanks, fellow Taoist. Xiaohua laughed bitterly. In front of a core formation cultivator, how could initial stage foundation establishment possibly be taken seriously? In the future, unless I have no other choice, I will never trade with any golden core or nascent soul cultivators again. Xiaohua secretly made up his mind. This is simply asking a tiger for its skin. If I'm not careful, my life will be taken. Soon after, Xiaohua followed Chen Kuei out of the Linlang pavilion and returned to the pavilion where he previously sat in meditation. At this time, the two female cultivators who were originally guarding the pavilion had either not returned or were no longer guarding him. They were no longer beside the pavilion. Xiaohua pushed open the door and entered. Just as he was about to close the door, he heard Chen Kuei say in a low voice behind him, "This concubine thanks fellow Taoist Xiao for saving my life today." Xiaohua turned his head to take a look. Chen Kuei was standing there with a bow. He smiled and waved his hand. "Fellow Taoist Chen Kuei, I was just trying to protect myself. It can't be considered as special assistance. You don't have to take it to heart. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you may think so, but I wouldn't dare." Although Spring Kuei stood up, she still said respectfully, "If it weren't for Dao Friend's help, the lives of over 100 servants of the Buried Flower Manor's Spring Division would have been lost." Hee, that's because the Manor Lord was angry. He wouldn't be so heartless. Xiaohua laughed. Spring Kuei didn't comment. After thinking for a while, she patted her hand and took out a few spiritual herbs from her storage bag. She smiled apologetically and said, "I don't have anything good, but these are the spiritual herbs unique to my Burial Flower Manor. Please accept them, fellow cultivator Xiao." "No need." Xiaohua waved his hand. "If the Manor Lord were to find out about these things, I'm afraid it wouldn't be good." "It doesn't matter. This was obtained by this concubine. It can't be considered as something particularly precious." Chen Kuei insisted on giving it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said, "If fellow Taoist has the heart to thank me, then pick up the abandoned spirit grass seeds of Burial Flower Manor, or the withered seeds that won't germinate, and give them to me. In short, Burial Flower Manor can treat them as trash." "Ah?" Spring Sunflower was stunned. She didn't know how to withdraw her outstretched hand. She asked in surprise, "What does fellow Taoist Xiao want those useless things for? My Burial Flower Manor casually discards those things." "Hee, that's good." Xiaohua says with a smile, "This Xiao likes to collect rare things, even if it's a dead spirit grass, it's still good." "I understand." Spring Sunflower said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, you wanted the beauty-retaining grass to be poisoned to death, right?" "Yes." Xiaohua nods and says with a smile, "That's right. Although this Xiao didn't obtain the Real beauty-retaining grass, the poisoned beauty-retaining grass is still beauty-retaining grass after all. This Xiao not only broadens his knowledge, but also can show off." "What's wrong with that?" "Alright, those things are easy." This concubine originally thought that fellow Taoist Xiao wanted to refuse this concubine's thanks. "Since you have such a request, then this concubine will thank fellow Taoist." Spring Sunflower says with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, please wait a few days. This concubine will pack them up and give them to fellow Taoist." "Hee, I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist." Xiaohua enters the pavilion with a smile and casually closes the door. Spring Sunflower's gaze is complicated. She looks at the half-closed door of the pavilion and turns around to leave. At night, still inside Linlang Pavilion. At this time, a crescent moon hangs in the sky. The silver moonlight sprinkles on the rippling blue lake water. Sitting on the railing of Linlang Pavilion, one can be intoxicated by the night scenery before one's eyes without using any magic. "Spring Sunflower, do you blame me for being ruthless to you during the day?" A clear and melodious voice echoes. Matched with such a beautiful moon, it is very pleasant to listen to. "This servant doesn't dare." Spring Sunflower answers without hesitation, "It was all this servant's carelessness that made a mistake. This servant deserves to be punished however Manor Lord wants to punish me." Sigh, now that I think about it, I was also angry at that time. Chen Yi says with some embarrassment, "Even if you want to punish me, there is no need to make you take the blame. Even more so, you shouldn't be considered as guilty as Spring Sect. This servant understands. This servant knows that Manor Lord won't be so ruthless. Spring Sunflower says with a smile, it's just that the situation during the day was too dangerous. If it wasn't for Xiaohua, oh, that's right. What did Xiaohua want to do with the poisoned youth-retaining grass? Did you find out clearly? Chinny nods and asks. Hee, of course this servant knows. Spring Sunflower says with a smile, this guy actually has a hobby of collecting strange spirit herbs or seeds. During the day when this servant sent him back to the pavilion, I wanted to thank him with spirit herbs first. He actually didn't want them and only wanted some rare seeds. Even if they are dead and won't germinate, it's fine. But this is actually a strange hobby? He wouldn't have any ulterior motives, right? Chen Yi is also surprised. She seems to have never heard of a cultivator with this hobby. This servant also doesn't know. That's why I didn't dare to casually agree to his request. Spring Sunflower smiles apologetically. I understand. Chen Yi claps her hands and says, you all shouldn't forget his origin. Origin? Spring Sunflower is surprised. She turns to look at Xia Lan and the others, not understanding. Sigh. Xiaohua was born as a loose cultivator. Although he is now a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect and can be considered a famous sect, he can't change the habit of cultivating since young. Qin Yi's face is full of disdain. Didn't you hear what he said? The youth-retaining grass was eaten by him. He's afraid of being poor. He wants to take anything good he sees, even if it is some withered seeds. And the spirit herbs you gave him aren't rare, right? Of course, how can this servant give him rare spirit herbs? Spring Sunflower quickly says with a smile. And that's right. Chen Yi curls her lips. He would rather have some seeds that he has never seen before than these ordinary spirit herbs. Isn't this a strange hobby? Manor Lord is wise. Spring Sunflower says with a smile. Then, how should this servant deal with him? Just give him useless things. Chen Yi impatiently waves her hand. Can he grow flowers out of the seeds? No matter what, he is your savior. Manor Lord is this servant's savior. This servant knows clearly. Spring Sunflower says with a smile, this servant is just saying it to him. And as long as you know. Chen Yi waves her hand, looks at the sky, and says to Qiuzhan, go and invite fellow Taoist Zhu for a chat. Yes, this servant knows. Spring Sunflower and Qiuzhan both nods. After looking at each other, Qiuzhan quickly walks away. Not long after, a tall, dignified middle-stage gold core cultivator follows Qiuzhan to Linlang Pavilion. Manor Lord Qin is in such a good mood. Zhu Qinghe seems to be very familiar with Chen Yi. He looks around without any trace of politeness and says, today's beautiful scenery, if not for Qiu Lai's mouth, it would be inferior. Fellow Taoist Zhu, this kind of lake and moonlight should be drunk in spring sleep. Why do you need Qiu Lai's mouth? It's not appropriate, it's not appropriate. Chen Yi shook her head without any trace of politeness. Zhu Qinghe is a cultivator around 60 years old, looks like Qin Yi's father. He waves his hand and says with a smile, that's because you female cultivators are sentimental. You are different from common men like me. Without Qiu Lai's spiciness, how can you taste the taste of a battlefield call? What does a battlefield call have to do with this moonlight and lake scenery? Chen Yi is curious. Zhu Qinghe says with a smile, I don't have soldiers in front of me, but I have soldiers in my heart. Can't it work? Of course it works. Chen Yi claps her hands and says, if fellow Taoist Zhu didn't have soldiers in his heart, we Qiuzhan, bring wine for fellow Taoist Zhu. Yes, Manor Lord. Qiuzhan smiles and takes out 3 fist-sized jade cups. Fellow Taoist Qin is really stingy. Zhu Qinghe glances at them and points with his hand. It's not that I'm stingy, it's just that fellow Taoist Zhu doesn't need to come. Chen Yi says with a smile, even Qiuzhan is shy with strangers. Yes, I understand. Qiuzhan hurriedly takes out a jade bottle from her storage bag and puts it on the jade plate with a smile. Good wine. Zhu Qinghe doesn't care. He points with his hand and a yellow spiritual wine flies out from the jade bottle and into his mouth. Give me some spring slumber wine. Chen Yi says to Chen Kuei, You all can leave as well. Yes, Chun Kuei takes out the jade bottle and puts it next to Chen Yi's hand. She salutes with Xia Lan and the others and leaves together. Fellow Taoist Jew, let me toast you. Chen Yi raises her jade cup and says with a smile. Thank you, Manor Lord Chen. Zhu Qinghe raises his jade bottle and says with a smile. The two drink for a while and chat. Chen Yi asks, Fellow Taoist Jew, a few years ago, I listened to your arrangement and placed Buried Flower Manor here. You said it would only take a few months, but in the blink of an eye, a few years have passed. Why haven't I heard anything from you? Could it be that there's something wrong with that place? Or maybe we didn't prepare enough? Hee, Manor Lord Qin, if there's no news, would I dare to come here? Zhu Qinghe says with a smile. The last thing was found by fellow Taoist Xie in the Flame Forest swamp 4 years ago. Although we didn't prepare enough, it was enough for us to go there. If I didn't have some trivial matters to attend to, I could have gone there 4 years ago. That's strange. Chen Yi says curiously, fellow Taoist Zhu is the mastermind of this trip. The things there are mainly useful to you. We're just accompanying you to take a look. Fellow Taoist Jew doesn't want the things there. What kind of trivial matters do you have to attend to? Hee, forgive me for not telling you. But when we get there, Manor Lord Chen will know. Zhu Qinghe shakes his head and says, even if others don't tell you, Manor Lord Chen will know. That's strange, that's strange. Chen Yi puts one hand on her forehead and seems to be drunk. I'm flattered. Fellow Taoist Jew, can you tell me in advance? Zhu Qinghe shakes his head slightly. Manor Lord Chen, you'd better not be curious. It's good for both of us. Hee, then I won't ask any more questions. Chen Yi raises her cup and says, let's hope that this trip will be successful. Do you still need to say it? We've prepared for more than 10 years. If we don't succeed, how can we show our faces? Zhu Qinghe laughs and raises his cup. Chapter 1983. Meanwhile, Xiaohua was sitting cross-legged inside the pavilion, his mind entering the space. The beauty-retaining grass that he had previously thrown in was placed on the ground by itself. At this time, it seemed that although the poisonous saliva did not further deteriorate, because the beauty-retaining grass only had a stem and no roots, it was simply impossible for it to survive. Xiaohua's illusion of a good thing simply did not work. Yes, with the increase of my cultivation base and realm, the range of this space has increased a lot. Now it seems to be almost 100 li. Moreover, with the increase of my realm, my mind seems to be able to control the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the space. Of course, this is just a feeling. How to control it needs to be carefully comprehended. Xiaohua's mind flew to a high place in the space, and he thought rather proudly, moreover, although this heavenly starry sky seems to be within 100 li of space, the specific range seems to be endless, far beyond the space, and the mind cannot reach it. The karma hand under the heavenly starry sky is a little clearer. It should be because Senior Huang Yi's suffering greatly affected me. However, this karma hand is definitely not that simple. Now that I look at this blurry karma hand, I have a feeling of worship, as if everything is under its control. In the future, if I have a great opportunity to comprehend it, then how great will my divine ability be? Xiaohua somewhat looked forward to the future when his cultivation base reached large success. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua's heart was full of hope, and he laughed in a low voice. Hee, this young master's space is so wonderful, can it still be a small fish in the Xiaoyu continent? Although the person who sealed this young master's Naiwan palace has great divine ability, he definitely can't think of this young master's space's foundation. This young master should still quietly cultivate. When my wings are full, it won't be too late to find someone to settle accounts. Yes, at that time, this young master's origin will also be revealed. Immediately, Xiaohua's heart was moved again, and his body slightly trembled. Damn, this young master has too many good things. There is no one to guide me properly. When Senior Huang Yi entered the ghost path, wasn't he forced to divide his soul into thousands of pieces because of the Immortal Alliance's experts? My mind is in space. Not only do I have to comprehend the way of heaven, but I also have to comprehend the hand of karma. I even have to go out of space to deal with it. Why can't I split my mind? Not to mention the blood shadow art, wouldn't Confucian cultivators, Buddhist cultivators, and even ghost cultivators be able to cultivate all Dharma spells? When Xiaohua thought of this, he was abnormally excited. He released his Buddhist sense and looked around the pavilion again and again. After confirming that there was nothing unusual, he sent his Buddhist sense into the mark left behind by Huang Yi and carefully searched. However, after he found it and finished reading the so-called doppelganger technique of the ghost cultivator, his expression became somewhat uncertain. This technique was called inextricably linked. It divided the body of the ghost into thousands of parts, but these thousands of parts were exactly the same as the core of the ghost. It could be said that each doppelganger was the original ghost, and each doppelganger could cultivate and even devour other doppelganger. In other words, tens of thousands of years ago, every fish in the cold river with Huang Yi's doppelganger in its body was Huang Yi himself. Huang Yi didn't explain clearly which fish's soul escaped from the Immortal Alliance's hands in the end, or if it was her hidden main soul that escaped the Immortal Alliance's pursuit. However, the hardships involved were inevitable. Huang Yi was already in the realm of 10,000 deaths, which was why he took the risk to use this technique and luckily escaped a so-called path of survival. Moreover, this technique was a ghost cultivator's secret inheritance, and was also a technique used exclusively by ghost cultivators. It couldn't be used in other cultivation paths. Even if Xiaohua thoroughly comprehended this technique and didn't use it on his soul, he would only split his mind. That would be too Xiaohus, and in the future he would have to deal with the problem of how to merge them. Although there was a description of devouring in the technique, was the mind the same as the soul? What about the effect on the two minds after devouring? This was all unknown. Xiaohua was a normal mortal realm cultivator, so it was unlikely that he would take this strange risk. Forget it, Xiaohua slapped his forehead and said with a bitter smile, I was too whimsical. Although I can't slow down my cultivation, I can't advance too rashly either. Although I have the auspicious talisman to protect me, if I take this kind of risk, there will always be an accident, and then I will be consigned to eternal damnation. Let's take a look at the specific technique first. It won't be too late to take the risk in the future if I can't do it. Immediately, Xiaohua withdrew his Buddhist consciousness, closed his eyes, and recalled the countless threads technique word by word, carefully comprehending it. After an unknown amount of time, he heard footsteps outside the pavilion. Xiaohua slightly opened his eyes, and with a sweep of his divine sense, he stood up and walked out of the pavilion. He smiled and said to Chun Kuei, who was slowly walking over, Fellow Taoist, do you have any good news? Hee, I wonder what fellow Taoist Xiao is referring to by good news? Chun Kuei also said with a smile. Naturally, it's the Manor Lord. When will you bring the thing I want? Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said in a low voice. Then fellow Taoist will be disappointed. Chun Kuei pursed her lips and said, in the past few days, other than Senior Zhu who came to my burial flower manor, no other seniors came, and the manor lord also didn't seem to have done anything. So it's like that? Xiaohua didn't seem disappointed and asked, fellow Taoist came, could it be that I can leave the manor? That's strange, fellow Taoist Xiao. Chun Kuei said curiously, I promised to reward fellow Taoist Xiao. How could fellow Taoist Xiao forget this matter? With that said, Chun Kuei took out a storage bag from her waist and handed it to Xiaohua, saying, this is what I promised fellow Taoist Xiao a few days ago. Now, fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. I brought all the trash of my burial flower manor over these years and gave it to fellow Taoist Xiao. All these years? Everything? Xiaohua blinked his eyes and said with a smile, I thought that these things would be kept secret in Burial Flower Manor, so I didn't dare to have too much hope, so I didn't think of it. Fellow Taoist, please forgive me. It's just some trash. Since fellow Taoist has taken it, we don't need to destroy it. Chun Kuei saw Xiaohua take the storage bag, and her face was a bit strange. She replied with a smile, since fellow Taoist Xiao wants it and I can return the favor, why not? Thank you, fellow Taoist. Xiaohua didn't look and cupped his hands. No need to thank me. You and I are even. Chun Kuei let out a sigh of relief and returned the greeting. Fellow Taoist Xiao still needs to keep this matter a secret and can't mention it to a third person. I'll leave now. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please wait here. Presumably, the Manor Lord will have arrangements. If fellow Taoist has any other matters, you can tell the servants to call me over. Okay. Xiaohua replied and watched Chun Kuei leave. Xiaohua waited until Chun Kuei left before closing the door. He thought that Burial Flower Manor would be on guard against him, but he didn't expect that Chun Kuei would really deliver these things. However, when he opened the storage bag and scanned it with his divine sense, he was even more delighted. Chapter 1984. It turned out that there were not only a lot of seeds in the storage bag, but also a few withered and broken jade orchid bamboos. What surprised Xiaohua the most was that the roots of the beauty retaining grass that he had always wanted were also in front of him. Thinking of what Chun Kuei had said, Xiaohua secretly nodded and said in his heart, "Giving people immortal grass leaves a lingering fragrance." Sure enough. Therefore, Xiaohua didn't hesitate. His mind entered the space and woke up all the puppets. On a piece of wasteland, he leveled the medicinal field and prepared to plant all the abandoned seeds. The jade orchid bamboos were inserted into the pool of water where the water pattern butterfly was. As for the lifeless roots of the beauty-retaining grass, Xiaohua thought for a moment and threw them far away at the edge of the space. He didn't want to do anything at this time to avoid any accidents. It seems that I have to properly understand the control of space. Xiaohua thought, now there are more and more things in the space. Little silver and little yellow are obedient, but if the dream mirage butterfly hatches from the egg, I may not be able to control it. I have to separate these things. Xiaohua already understood the cultivation method of countless threads. It was very strange, so he didn't dare to try it at this time. Thinking for a moment, he used earth amplification to slowly refine the earth crystal Yao milk. At the same time, he began to comprehend the mystery of soul stab in his heart. Far to the north of the country of Shi, in a place where there were few people, the wind whistled and yellow sand filled the air. The sand and dust that covered the sky constantly fluttered in the air, making the whole world look like a dim yellow. A dim yellow brilliance flew across the distant sky, and then a powerful divine sense swept through the yellow sand. When the brilliance fell and the brilliance slightly dissipated, a young cultivator appeared. This cultivator's face was thin, his body was slender, and under a pair of sword-like eyebrows, his eyes were bright and full of expression. The most peculiar thing was that the cultivator was carrying a long sword on his back. This cultivator was none other than the sect master of Seven Skills Sect, Reverend Lu Enai, a late nascent soul stage cultivator. Reverend Lu Enai showed his figure, patted his hand and took out a jade slip from his storage bag. He scanned it with his divine sense, then looked up at the surroundings and said in a low voice, "It's here." However, to create such a vicious scene, that fellow is quite thoughtful. Then, Immortal Liuxiu waved his hand, and the long sword behind his back instantly turned into a rainbow, splitting into four and flying away in different directions. After 10 minutes, the 4 swords flew back. As expected, there's no one around. The corners of Reverend Lu Su's mouth curved into a smile. He was just about to take back his sword when suddenly, a slight buzzing sound came out from under his feet. Reverend Lu and I was slightly startled. He had already checked this place before, otherwise, he would not have missed it. How could it be ordinary if he, a late nascent soul cultivator, could not find it? Indeed, after the faint cry, a few palm-sized, yellowish desert scorpions slowly crawled out of the sand not far away from Reverend Lu Yun. A desert scorpion. Reverend Lu and I was somewhat surprised, but now that he had seen the desert scorpions, he felt slightly relieved. This is the edge of the northern desert. Although there are few people around, it's not as harsh as the northern desert. The desert scorpions should not have come here. Reverend Lu and I knew that the desert scorpions were born with the nature of earth, and mixed together with the sand of the northern desert. Ordinary divine sense could not separate them at all. Therefore, it was not surprising that he could not find them. However, what happened next made him frown deeply. According to the ancient records, the desert scorpion was usually docile and good at attacking groups of people and would never attack unless it was disturbed. But now, it had actually circled above the yellow sand for a while, then wielded its large, sharp pincers and flew straight towards Reverend Lu Ming. This. Reverend Lu and I scanned them with his divine sense and could not help laughing. Although the desert scorpions were terrifying, there were tens of thousands of them. Moreover, in the depth of the northern desert, once they appeared, there would definitely be hundreds of thousands or even millions of them. These few desert scorpions, not to mention Reverend Lu and I, a late Yuanying stage cultivator, even gold core stage cultivators or foundation establishment stage cultivators could definitely kill them with their own magical abilities. Swish. Reverend Lu and I casually waved his flying sword. A sword light flashed, and unexpectedly, several desert scorpions were killed at the same time from different directions. Looking at the remains of the desert scorpions falling on the sand and then being blown away by the wind, Reverend Lu and I slightly shook his head. Cultivation is always the theme of eternity. As strong as Yuanying stage cultivators, as weak as desert scorpions, in front of an existence with a profound cultivation, they can only be. Unfortunately, before Reverend Lu and I could finish his words, a swish swish sound was heard from under his feet. The clear cry became more and more ear-piercing. This is bad. No wonder Reverend Lu and I could not express his feelings. His face slightly changed, and he hurriedly flew up from the sand and floated in midair. Underneath his feet, within the range of tens of miles, desert scorpions emerged from the yellow waves one after another like surging tadpoles. What surprised Reverend Lu and I the most was that not only were the clear cries mixed with each other, faintly having the effect of seizing one's soul, but also, one after another, weak divine wills, mixed with emotionlessness, excitement, anger and other emotions, swept across his body. Oh my! Reverend Lu and I was slightly startled. Although he was not afraid of these little things, being surrounded by tens of thousands of desert scorpions was also an extremely annoying thing. Moreover, there might be other spiritual creatures among these desert scorpions. Buzz. While Reverend Lu and I was hesitating, hundreds and thousands of desert scorpions had already flown up and swarmed towards him from all directions. Sun Yunzi, this is not a trick of this guy, is it? A thought suddenly came to Reverend Lu Ni's mind. He had come here at Sun Yunzi's invitation, but he immediately denied it. It was definitely not an easy thing to plot against a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, and this simple northern desert was simply not a good place to do so. Go! Reverend Lu and I waved his hand, and the long sword in his hand flashed with several beams of light, killing all the desert scorpions within 1,000 feet of him. At the same time, his body also flew up and was about to fly into the distance. However, when Reverend Lu Ni's body had just flown up 1,000 feet, a pitch-black beam of light suddenly flashed across the yellow sand about 100 feet below him. Following the whistling wind and sand in midair, that beam of light was both crooked and extremely fast, striking towards Reverend Lu Ni's lower body. There's more. Reverend Lu and I was slightly angry. He rubbed his left hand, and a splendid ray of light was produced. As his hand gesture fell, the ray of light fell down rapidly, and the wind and sand in the ray of light all stopped, unable to move at all. In the area where the ray of light fell, the desert scorpions within 1,000 feet radius were either floating in midair, or entrenched on the sand layer, or had just drilled out of the yellow sand. All of them stopped there quietly, not moving even a little bit. Reverend Lu and I stretched out his right hand, and a bright silver sword light unexpectedly emerged from his hand. As his right palm chopped down, the sword light rushed towards the black light that was attacking him. With only a slight touch, the black light was smashed, and the sword light did not stop at all, piercing into the yellow sand. Below the yellow sand, about 10 feet of yellow sand slightly trembled, and then became still again. Seeing this, Reverend Lu and I did not stay any longer. His body slightly flashed, and he directly rushed up, flying to 1,000 feet high, and then threw himself in a certain direction. However, as soon as he flew away, a divine thought swept over from another direction and just locked onto him. Is that Fairy Yingjue? Reverend Lu and I was slightly stunned and immediately recognized that familiar divine thought. His flowing body stopped in midair. Reverend Lu and I? You are also here for the appointment? In the distant seven-colored ray of light, Fairy Yingjue, who was dressed in a seven-colored robe, also showed her figure and also transmitted her voice to Reverend Lu and I in surprise. Yes, I am here for the appointment. It's Sun Yunzi who invited I. Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, what are you trying to do? Fairy Yingjue's figure stopped 100 feet away from Reverend Lu and I, and said very strangely, I thought that I was the only one who invited him. I didn't expect that fellow Taoist would also be invited. Then her divine thoughts swept under her feet, and she slightly frowned. Moreover, there are so many desert scorpions here. Could it be that Sun Yunzi has some ulterior motives? It's still not time yet. Let's wait and see. Reverend Lu and I glanced under his feet and said coldly, he can't be thinking of leaving all of us in the northern desert, right? Hee. Fairy Yingjue covered her mouth and laughed. Unless he, Shanghua sect, also doesn't want to establish himself in the Dawn Rain continent. The two late nascent soul stage cultivators stood in the sky with the strong wind, and the brilliance around their bodies was not affected by the wind at all, as if they were taking a leisurely stroll. After the time it took to eat a meal, Sun Yunzi's divine thought swept over from afar. Seeing the two of them standing in the sky, he couldn't help but be startled, and transmitted his voice, Fellow Taoists, although the wind in the northern desert is very strong, it's not the time for the two of you to walk hand in hand. It's too cold to be high up in the sky. Sun Yunzi. Reverend Lu and I sneered, and looked at the faint red light on Sun Yunzi's body, and transmitted his voice. You found a good place. If I hadn't reacted quickly, I'm afraid that I wouldn't have been able to see fellow Taoist. Fellow Taoist Lu Kong, what do you mean? Sun Yunzi was slightly surprised, and deliberately swept his divine thought around. When he went deep into the yellow sand, he realized that something was wrong. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. This is I's fault. I passed by here a few years ago, and saw that there were no traces of people here. It was a good place, so I invited you two to meet here. Who would have thought that after not seeing each other for a few years, there would be desert scorpions here? I don't think it's fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi's fault. Fairy Yingjue interrupted again. These desert scorpions are usually in the depths of the northern desert. Who knows how they came to the edge today? And these things don't seem to be very strong, so they're not troublesome to us. Reverend Lu and I naturally knew the balance of the tripartite balance, so he didn't say anything and asked, Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, why did you ask us to meet here today? Sun Yunzi didn't care about Reverend Lu Su's ambiguous attitude. Instead, he looked at Fairy Yingjue and said, I've come to you, my fellow Taoists, for two pieces of news. One is good news, and the other is bad news. Which one would you like to hear first? A fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, you're so interesting. Fairy Yingjue laughed. I haven't listened to someone talk like this for a long time. I didn't expect that fellow Taoist, who is thousands of years old, could still be so leisurely. Chapter 1985. If it can make Sun Yunzi laugh like this, then it must be good news. Immortal Lu Shi's heart moved, as if he thought of something. His body moved slightly and he said, I am willing to listen to good news. Really? Fairy Yingjue also thought of something, and clapped her hands. Could it be that that thing has been completed? You two fellow Taoists are right. Sun Yunzi clapped his hands, and 2 jade bottles were taken out. He waved his hands, and the bottles flew to the two of them. I did not disappoint you, and finally succeeded in refining the Python Dragon pill. Immortal Lu Shi waved his hand, and a huge light shadow flew out, firmly covering the jade bottles. He said, This is fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi. If it was fellow Taoist Yingjue, I'm afraid you would have succeeded in refining it 10 years ago. Oh no. Fairy Yingjue's face was also filled with joy. She slightly waved her arm, and a big hand flew out, catching the jade bottles. Then she said, although my Xuanyan school is founded on alchemy, fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi's alchemy skills are not inferior to I. I dare not say that I can refine the Python Dragon Pill in just a few years. Fairy Ingzhua took the jade bottles, and her cherry lips slightly opened. She spat out a mouthful of Zhenyuan and opened the jade bottles. A fist-sized pill, emitting a blazing brilliance, like a dancing flame, flew out of the jade bottles. As the pill appeared in the air, an incomparably rich medicinal fragrance spread around Fairy Ingzhua. This medicinal fragrance seemed to be stagnant, and did not disperse in the slightest in the astral wind. The faint roar of a dragon came from the Python Dragon core. Within the flames, a small white snake was rapidly circling around the core. Every time it circled around, the white snake would change. After circling around for 81 times, it actually turned into a real fire dragon. This fire dragon was exactly the appearance of the little white dragon. Great. Fairy Ingzhua stared at it for half the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, then opened her mouth, and Zhenyuan spread out, and the Python Dragon Pill was sucked into the jade bottle. Then she cast layers of spells on the jade bottle, and put it away in her arms. Immortal Lu Shi's face was also full of surprise, and he had already put away the jade bottle. Thank you, fellow Taoist Xuanyun. Fairy Ingzhua glanced at Reverend Lu Shi, then both of them cupped their fists and said, this boa dragon pill is quite different from the ones recorded in the books. I'm afraid our chances of stepping into deity transformation have increased by another 10%. Huh, you don't have to be so polite. Sun Yunzi sighed in his heart, but he still put on a smile and said, we have already made an agreement to refine this Python Dragon Pill. I don't dare to go against our agreement. As for the mutation of the Python Dragon core, it should be due to the difference in the core of the Python Dragon that we killed. Of course, Reverend Lu and I nodded slightly. Although Sun Yunzi had given him the Python Dragon Pill today because of the vow of heart, and it was something he deserved, he still felt a little grateful to Sun Yunzi for giving him the Python Dragon Pill. Therefore, his tone became much gentler. According to the ancient records, the Python Dragon Pill is a half-dragon and half-python. By taking the Python Dragon Pill, we have solved the mystery of the transformation of a python into a dragon, and stepped into the separating divinity stage from Yuaning. Today, this Python Dragon Pill is actually a transformation from a python into a dragon, and we have a deeper understanding of the process. Our chances of stepping into the separating divinity stage have increased by more than 10%, and even 20% is not surprising. Yes, there is indeed something wrong with that white python. Fairy Ingzhua looked at Sun Yunzi thoughtfully. Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, have you found the soul that flew away? Sun Yunzi smiled bitterly. I have used all my power, but I still can't find any clues. I can't find it anywhere. However, the white python was in the separating divinity stage when it was alive. Since it has already turned into a soul essence, it is nothing to worry about. If I can't find it, then I can't find it. Sun Yunzi naturally knew the effect of the Python Dragon Pill was due to the dragonization incantation, but he couldn't say it out loud. He sighed in his heart that he didn't have enough luck, and quickly changed the topic. Today, I invited the two of you here to tell you the good news of the Python Dragon Pill and the bad news. Reverend Lu and I glanced at Fairy Ingzhua, and asked curiously, there are not many things in this world that can make us think it is bad news, right? Exactly. Fairy Ingzhua smiled. Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, please enlighten us. Hehe, fellow Taoists, don't pretend that you don't know anything. Sun Yunzi smiled. Since I know, it is impossible for you two to not know. Moreover, I took out the Python Dragon Pill, so naturally I have full sincerity. This is related to the future of our three sects. Fairy Ingzhua and Reverend Lu and I both agreed. After a while, Reverend Lu and I smiled and said, this is related to the future of our sects, so it is naturally a big matter. The people of the Immortal Alliance will definitely stand up for us. Why should we be anxious? Immortal Alliance? Sun Yunzi sneered. They are a group of old farts. Why would they care about our life and death? They have reached a certain level. As long as they pass the heavenly tribulation and become immortals, they will be free and unfettered. They will not care about us. We are still far away from the Mahayana stage and the heavenly tribulation. So, you two fellow Taoists have also noticed the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Fairy Yingzhou saw that Sun Yunzi and Reverend Lu and I were tit for tat again, so she had to ask. Sun Yunzi nodded. Fellow Taoist Yingzhou is right. I have thought hard for a long time, and even sought the elders of our sects, but still to no avail. Reverend Lu and I did not speak, but the expression on his face was the same. I am the same, Fairy Yingzhou said with a bitter face. In the past 10 years, the disciples we have recruited have become more and more mixed. They are no longer as excellent as before. Moreover, the bloodline of aristocratic families has been awakening frequently. If there are no restrictions, they will definitely become great talents in the future. Cultivator aristocratic families and even those rogue cultivators may be on par with our sects. Rogue cultivators? Reverend Lu and I shook his head slightly. The aristocratic families that fellow Taoist mentioned are possible, but the so-called rogue cultivators are unnecessary. The rogue cultivators that I mentioned are devil cultivators. Fairy Yingzhou sneered. Fellow Taoist Lu Kong does not know about the rise of the heavenly demon sect. There are also many rogue cultivators who have joined the devil sect. Yes, I naturally know about this. Reverend Lu and I nodded. They are just a group of motley crew. Under the banner of devil cultivators, they are incomparably filthy and have all kinds of cultivation. They will not amount to anything. Yes, it seems that there used to be a small organization abandoned by the heavens, which was controlled by the heavenly demon sect. The heavenly demon sect is nothing in our eyes. At this time, we don't need to care about them. Sun Yunzi smiled and said, what I mean is, if our three sects still don't find a way to recruit disciples, or find a suitable cultivation method for future disciples, then the three major cultivation sects of the state of Shi. I'm afraid we'll have to change sects. It can't be that serious. Reverend Lu and I laughed and said, I've had a deep talk with the elders. The current cultivation method is still usable, but the method of selecting disciples has to be changed. Only when the method is found, our three sects will still be able to live forever. Chapter 1986. I'm not afraid now, but what about in the future? Sun Yunzi said solemnly, it's only been a few decades. What if it's 1,000 years later, or 10,000 years later? The spiritual chi of heaven and earth has completely changed. Can cultivation methods still be cultivated? Hearing this, Fairy Yingzhou and Immortal Lu and I were silent for a while. Obviously, they had thought about it. This matter is unusual. I want to discuss it with you two first. I have a plan, and then I'll discuss it with the leaders of several sects in Meng country and Lian country. We have to come up with a countermeasure. Sun Yunzi said, I always feel that this matter is unusual. If it's not handled well, the Taoist sect may be doomed eternally. Maybe. Fairy Yingzhou sighed. I also did something in the sect, but the effect was not too obvious. Moreover, this involves the secret of my Xuanyan sect. Forgive I for not being able to tell you everything. Well, since fellow Taoist Yingzhou said so, you're already open-minded. Sun Yunzi glanced at Immortal Lu and I and said with a smile, to be honest, I also did some experiments, but they were all not good. There's no effect. What about Huan country? Immortal Lu and I sneered. I wonder how their sword cultivators and beast cultivators are doing. Hee, fellow Taoist Lu Kong, you're right. Sun Yunzi said with a smile, if our Taoist sect is in danger, I'm afraid these cultivators will have an opportunity to take advantage of it. According to the message from the disciples in the sect, they've also changed. However, the specific situation is not clear. After all, the disciples who can go deep into Huan country are all low-level cultivators. It's impossible for them to reach the core. Fairy Yingzhou thought for a while and said, well, I'll go back and think about it carefully. If there's any progress, let's communicate more. Sun Yunzi waved his hand and said, in fact, If only one sect has the secret, that sect will dominate. However, if the Taoist sect declines, that sect will definitely not last long. Fellow Taoists, do you think so too? Fairy Yingzhua nodded, while Immortal Lu and I did not comment. Of course, apart from these two pieces of news, I invited you here today for another more important matter, which is related to our cultivation. I'd like to hear your opinions. As Sun Yunzi spoke, he looked at the two's expressions. Just as he expected, the two's expressions were calm. Clearly, they had the same perception as Sun Yunzi. Now that the spiritual qi of heaven and earth has changed, not only does it affect the cultivation of low-level disciples, but it also restricts high-level cultivators like us. Sun Yunzi opened his mouth and said, "Many of the elders of my splendid sect who have been cultivating diligently have not made any progress in their cultivation for more than 10 years. Occasionally, they would make some progress, but it was all due to other opportunities. I believe the same is true for Xuanyan School and Qiqiao sect." Seeing that Immortal Lu and I and Fairy Yingzhua did not speak, Sun Yunzi's eyes flickered and he continued, "Low-level cultivators need very little spiritual qi of heaven and earth. The change of spiritual qi of heaven and earth will not affect their cultivation. However, we use too much spiritual qi of heaven and earth for our cultivation. Now that the spiritual qi of heaven and earth has changed, our cultivation will naturally be affected. The same must be true for the other seniors of the Divine Transformation Realm, Void Refinement Realm, and Body Integration Realm. In other words, simply absorbing the spiritual qi of heaven and earth will not satisfy our cultivation needs. Spiritual herbs and pills are like spiritual stones. Only when they are precious can they support our cultivation progress. For example, the Python Dragon pill is not only needed for us to break through the barrier, but also for us to replenish our spiritual power. The spiritual stone mine will also be the key to our cultivation in the future. Moreover, as early as 10 years ago, there seems to be some news from the Immortal Alliance that many sects have already begun to stockpile spiritual stones to cope with the change of spiritual qi of heaven and earth. The current spiritual herbs can still satisfy our needs for refining pills. However, if the spiritual herbs in the future are mixed with the change of spiritual qi of heaven and earth, the quality of the pills refined will definitely decline. At that time, even if they can satisfy low-level cultivators, they will not be able to satisfy high-level cultivators like us. In addition, I have just received a piece of news. In the past 10 years, there were 3 seniors of the Great Ascension Realm who went through the heavenly tribulations. However, they never returned. Their natal spiritual tablets were damaged, and none of them succeeded. Speaking of this, Immortal Lu Shi, who had been silent all this time, said, "Sun Yunzi, aren't your words a bit alarmist? If the 3 seniors all succeeded, how could it be called heavenly tribulations? Even if 300 people failed to pass the heavenly tribulations, it would be normal, right?" "Lu Shi, don't you understand?" Sun Yunzi said angrily, "The spiritual qi of heaven and earth has changed, and so has the heavenly Tao. I'm afraid our path to immortality will be blocked." "It doesn't seem to be that serious." Fairy Yingzhua said hesitantly, "The Taoist sect of the Dawn Rain continent has existed for tens of thousands of years since the ancient times. It won't be so fragile. If our cultivation can't improve, what will happen to the Taoist sect?" Sun Yunzi said angrily, "What will happen to it? All cultivators will reach the nascent soul stage at the end of their cultivation. In the future, they will just wait for the end of their lifespan to come and enter the reincarnation cycle." "No, impossible." Fairy Yingzhua smiled and shook her head. Fellow cultivator Sun Yunzi is worrying too much. Right now, there are many Great Ascension Realm and Tribulation Passing Realm seniors in the 3 countries of the Dawn Rain continent. There are even more Great Ascension Realm and Tribulation Passing Realm seniors in the distant Cultivation Alliance and Cultivation Empire. How can the cultivation world fall into such a state? What's impossible?" Sun Yunzi saw that Immortal Lu Shi was about to retort, so he said, "In the ancient times, the Celestials were in charge. They didn't cultivate and only focused on the sun and the moon. Their bodies were powerful, and they dominated for a period of time. However, in the end, they were replaced by the Taoist sect, the Buddhist sect, the Confucian sect, the Sword sect, and other sections. Do you dare to say that we can compare to the Celestials in the ancient times? Seeing that Immortal Lu Shi and Fairy Ingzhuo were deep in thought, Sun Yunzi took the opportunity to say, since this is the case, we should look for opportunities while we are at death's door and find a way out for the Taoist sect. During this period, cultivation resources are the most important. Immortal Lu Shi didn't have time to refute, so he asked, fellow cultivator Sun Yunzi, what do you mean? Sun Yunzi calmly said, in I's opinion, our 3 sects should control the majority of the spirit stone veins in the country of Shi. Today, I invited the 2 of you here to discuss how to divide the spirit stone veins in the country of Shi into 3 parts. Then, we will divide the spirit stone veins in the country of Shi among the 3 parts. Great. Fairy Ingzhuo clapped her hands and said, I also have the same idea. Although this matter may take tens of thousands of years or even millions of years to come, now that we have seen the opportunity, we should prepare for the future. Sun Yunzi raised his eyebrows and said, what does fellow cultivator Lu Kong think? I don't have any objection. When it came to benefits, Immortal Lu Shi would not refuse. However, he pointed his finger and said with a smile, fellow cultivator Sun Yunzi, you have found a good place. There are more troublesome spirit objects coming, so we can't stay here for long. Sun Yunzi scanned with his divine sense and said with a smile, sure enough, let's go. Although the location of our 3 sects is not suitable, there are many other places. There's no need to cause trouble here. After saying that, Sun Yunzi turned into a rainbow and flew towards the south. Fairy Ingzhuo and Immortal Lu Kong also used their divine powers and left. At the place where Immortal Lu Shi killed the desert scorpion, after a while, a huge desert scorpion about 1,000 feet in size, with a yellowish body and some faintly flickering dark runes, easily drilled out of the yellow sand. Its huge poisonous pincers were shining with a dim light, and its long tail was still buried in the yellow sand. In the buried flower manner, Xiaohua had been comprehending the soul stab for several days. This was a secret method of controlling divine sense, which was very abstruse. However, Xiaohua seemed to be very familiar with the art of divine sense. Others might not be able to comprehend this secret method in their lifetime, but he had gained quite a lot in these few days. This is the secret method of ghost cultivators. I can actually comprehend it by analogy. Am I a genius? Xiaohua's little tail was raised again. However, he immediately thought to himself, damn it, did Cheni, the great manor lord, did she go or not? I don't know how long I have to wait. Is Xue Xue in the Haoming City waiting for me? Or has she safely arrived in the Haoming City? Thinking of Qin Yi's magic power as a middle gold core cultivator, Xiaohua unconsciously felt a little discouraged. He knew very well that this soul stab could indeed surprise and wound the opponent's divine sense. However, it was only effective against opponents of the same level or similar divine sense range. If he fought against Qin Yi, not only would the soul stab not hurt her, it would even backfire on him. Cultivation base, realm, they all need to be improved. Xiaohua once again lamented about his time. However, Xiaohua didn't know that just as he was feeling melancholy, there were 4 gold core cultivators sitting casually in the Linlang Pavilion in the middle of the lake in the buried flower manor. Needless to say, it was the beautiful Qin Yi. Her left hand was Zhu Qinghe of the Su Yan school, and her right hand was a cultivator in white clothes. This cultivator looked very ordinary and even had a bitter expression on his face. A slanted and faint scar ran across the back of his ear and went straight into his hair. This cultivator also had a middle gold core cultivation base. Sitting below this cultivator was someone Xiaohua was familiar with. It was Xie Zhiqian of the Immortal Ascension School. Chen Yi raised her cup and said to the cultivator in white, Chang Yefeng, fellow Taoist Chang, the Huan country's rock border sect is very far away. Fellow Taoist Chang must be tired after coming all the way here. Let me toast you. Chang Yefeng didn't have any smile on his face. Although his words weren't cold, they were still faint. He raised his jade cup and said, I don't dare. I received fellow Taoist Zhu's message a few years ago and made preparations. I didn't expect to wait for 6 years. I thought this matter was already over, but when I received the message, I remembered this agreement. I rushed here in a hurry, so I'm not tired. Please. Chen Yi slightly raised her cup and used her red lips to touch the jade cup. Please. Chang Yefeng raised his neck and drank all the spirit wine in the jade cup. He pointed his hand and a strand of spirit wine flew out from the wine pot next to him and poured into the jade cup. When the jade cup was full, Chang Yefeng raised his head and looked at everyone. He was a bit puzzled and said, "When I heard fellow Taoist Zhu's message, I thought that if we were going to that place, we would have some help. But today, it seems like it's just the 4 of us? Isn't it a bit weak?" Chapter 1987. Hey, what kind of powerful help do you want? Zhu Qinghe took a sip of wine and said, "Could it be that you want to see the Golden Core Stage Cultivator from the Kingdom of Shi? Or the Golden Core Stage Cultivator from the Kingdom of Meng? Or the Golden Core Stage Cultivator from the Utopia faction?" "That's not it," Chang Yefeng said. "If there's them, how can I have a share? I think you won't be able to hold your position as the manager. But that place is dangerous after all. Even nascent soul stage cultivators may be in danger. The 4 of us don't have much confidence, right?" "You worry too much, fellow Chang." Xie Zhiqian smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhu has already talked to this Xie. He has been to that place and has retreated unscathed. However, there are some places that can't be passed through without special items. To tell you the truth, fellow Taoist, this Xie has also made some preparations over the years. If these preparations aren't enough, we can just return empty-handed. What can we lose?" "That's right, fellow Chang. Fellow Chang, even fellow Chang, who is at the early stage of the Golden Core stage, wants to give it a try. Why do you have so many scruples? Could it be that you're inferior to a woman like me?" Chen Yi took the opportunity to laugh. "Hey, that place is one of the top 10 dangerous places in the Xiaoyu continent. It has always been a fierce place. If I didn't have a heart of fear, I'm afraid it's impossible for me to cultivate until now. However, since you've already made such a comprehensive plan, and I've also made sufficient preparations, what's the harm in breaking into that dangerous place?" Chang Yefeng still said lightly, "However, before taking action, we should discuss all the countermeasures clearly." "Yes, what fellow Chang said is very reasonable." Xie Zhiqian clapped his hands and said, "I also took some time to check the ancient books. Fortunately, I obtained some records of that competition. I think it must be the place that fellow Chang mentioned." "Is it?" Zhu Qinghe was overjoyed and said, "It's really a famous sect. The Immortal Ascension sect actually has such a secret record of the competition. What's in it?" Xie Zhiqian said with a smile, "It's not much. It's just some guesses of some seniors in the sect. However, these guesses are in line with what fellow Chang said. They are in line with some things that I've prepared." Seeing that Xie Zhiqian didn't say more, Zhu Qinghe didn't insist. He nodded and said, "Chang Yefeng is indeed a secret sect. Not many people know about it, and these people have already died, so there are no records. There are no records at all. It's that your sect has some guesses. It's just that." Xie Zhiqian looked around and said with a wry smile, "We seem to be missing a fellow cultivator. Chang Yefeng Chang. Chang of Chang Chang fellow Chang Chang you Chang of Chang 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 have Chang Chang?" Chang Yefeng nodded and said, "Several years ago, when I was looking for the Fire Bat King in the Flame Forest Swamp, I met Zhen Yi of the Thunder Controlling Sect. Zhen Yi is a cultivator at the early stage of the Gold Core realm. Although his cultivation is not high, he must be proficient in the thunder escaping technique of the Thunder Controlling Sect. His flying speed must be faster than ours. That day, I gave him the communication charm and the location of the Buried Flowers Manor in exchange for the heavenly Yin grass that fellow Chang Yefeng mentioned. I haven't received any messages from him in the past few years, and Manor Head Chen hasn't seen him come to visit. I'm afraid that he isn't interested in the heavenly Yin grass." Just now, on the way here, I was muttering whether I should go to the thunder-controlling sect to invite a cultivator here. Before Xie Zhiqian finished speaking, Zhu Qinghe and Chang Yefeng both said, "Don't? I'm afraid it's not appropriate for a disciple of the thunder-controlling sect to participate." Xie Zhiqian nodded and said, "Yes, I was thinking the same thing. Therefore, I didn't say anything in the jade slip that I gave Zhenyi. I only mentioned the location of the heavenly Yin grass." Chenyi didn't say anything. She just looked at the three of them. When they stopped talking, she smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, yeah, you don't mean what you say." "What do you mean, Manor Headchen?" Xie Zhiqian asked curiously. "Fellow Taoists, yeah, you didn't see Zhenyi in the flame forest swamp, right?" Chen Yi said with a smile. "Ah? How did fellow Taoist Chen know? Could it be that fellow Taoist Zhenyi came?" Xie Zhiqian said happily, "Manor Headchen, why didn't you say so earlier? Hee, Zhenyi can't come? He already died in the flame forest swamp." Chen Yi said with a smile, "However, one of his martial nephews came to the Buried Flowers Manor for the heavenly Yin grass." "Oh," Xie Zhiqian nodded disappointedly. "I know. It's the Foundation Establishment cultivator that I entrusted the jade slip to. I think his name is Hua or something." "Xiao Hua," Chen Yi said. "He's in the Buried Flowers Manor right now." Not only Xie Zhiqian, but Zhu Qinghe and Chang Yefeng were also surprised. They said with a smile, "The heavenly Yin grass didn't attract a useful golden core cultivator. Instead, it attracted a useless Foundation Establishment cultivator." Yes, he was interested in the heavenly Yin grass's ability to neutralize Yin and Yang. He wanted to use the heavenly Yin grass to help his junior sister build her foundation. Chen Yi explained with a smile. "Like I said, the heavenly Yin grass is indispensable for cultivators with thunder attribute constitutions. It's impossible that Zhenyi didn't come." Xie Zhiqian said with a smile. "However, Xiao Hua is just a Foundation Establishment cultivator. Even if he knows the thunder escape technique, it's useless to us." Indeed, if we bring such a burden with us, who knows what will happen? It's not appropriate. Zhu Qinghe also objected. Chen Yi said with a smile, "I just made a deal with him. If there's a chance to pick the heavenly Yin grass, I'll give it to him. I don't plan to bring him with me." Hee. Chang Yefeng laughed at this moment. "In my opinion, if Xiao Hua really knows the thunder escape technique, we might as well bring him with us. Maybe he'll be useful? What do you think, fellow Taoists?" "Fellow Taoist Chang, you mean?" Xie Zhiqian blinked and didn't say what he meant. Zhu Qinghe looked at Chen Yi thoughtfully. Chen Yi's reaction was also strange. She glanced at Zhu Qinghe and then looked at the wine cup. She didn't say anything, as if there was some heaven-defying Taoist magic in the wine cup. "I still don't think it's appropriate." Zhu Qinghe thought for a moment and still shook his head. "This matter involves. I'm afraid it'll be leaked. If fellow Taoist Xie and fellow Taoist Chang didn't insist, I definitely wouldn't say anything. This Xiao Hua is a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. If he has some secret methods to tell his master about this matter, if the Imperial Thunder sect or even his master interferes, what we can get will be much less. Or maybe it'll be like drawing water with a bamboo basket." Xie Zhiqian and Chang Yefeng heard this and felt somewhat dissatisfied. They opened their mouths but didn't say anything. Chen Yi, who hadn't said anything, said at this time, "According to Xiao Hua, he's a rogue cultivator and his master is only at the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm." Chapter 1988. What does Manor Lord Chen mean? Zhu Qinghe frowned, seemingly puzzled. Manor Lord Chen means to ignore this disciple called Xiao Hua. Chang Yefeng said with a smile, "Since he's a loose cultivator and his master is only in the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, he's just a little disciple in the Imperial Thunder sect with no backing. What could he possibly reveal? However, since he doesn't have any background, then he naturally can't know the lightning escape technique, right?" Zhu Qinghe's brows relaxed, and he said with a smile, "My Su Yan school has plenty of such disciples. Why would we need him there?" "That's true." Xie Zhiqian nodded. After pondering for a moment, he said, but Zhenyi took him to the flame forest swamp. I'm afraid this guy is riding on Zhenye's thigh and has received some benefits from Zhenyi. Isn't that simple? Chen Yi said with a smile. Call Xiaohua over and ask him. If he knows the lightning escape technique, bring him along. There are some places where he can still use it. Zhu Qinghe looked at the three of them, calculating in his heart. He understood very well that even if Xiaohua knew the lightning evasion technique, he was still only at the foundation establishment stage. His flying speed couldn't possibly be faster than them. However, since the three of them had the same intention and had their own plans, he didn't feel like saying anything more. All right, call Xiaohua over and ask him. If he really has a superhuman flying technique, bring him along. Zhu Qinghe nodded and looked at Chen Yi. He also wants to get the heavenly ingress. It's always good if he can help. Hearing Chen Yi call him to the Linlang Pavilion, Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised. His little heart was beating wildly. This trip to the Burial Flower Manor was really too smooth. Not only did he obtain some benefits, he only had to take out some ancient secret method to use poison to counter poison, and he was able to exchange it for the sky ingress that Xue Xue urgently needed. He was really lucky. Xiaohua even couldn't help but touch the peacock illusion on his chest. However, when he saw the golden core cultivators in Linlang Pavilion, Xiaohua was slightly stunned. He hurriedly greeted Chen Yi first, then greeted them one by one according to their cultivation level. Finally, when he greeted Xie Zhiqian, he said apologetically, Senior Xie, Junior was unable to deliver the jade slip to Martial Uncle Zhenyi. Junior has failed Senior's trust. It's okay. Xie Zhiqian laughed. How can anything in the world be perfect? On the other hand, fellow Taoist Zhenye's death has truly exceeded I's expectations. My Donrain continent has lost another fellow Taoist that we can work together with. Even though the flame forest swamp was a dangerous place, if a golden core cultivator was a little more careful, it might not be a big deal. I didn't expect fellow Taoist Zhen to be. Xiaohua smiled apologetically. Junior is a foundation-building cultivator. Junior isn't clear about Martial Uncle Zhen's matters. That day, I merely followed him to Flame Forest Swamp. By the time I found Martial Uncle Zhen, he had already died. Alas, what a tragedy. The price of us cultivators changing the heavens and changing our lives is indeed not cheap. Seeing that Xiaohua was unwilling to speak, Xie Zhiqian didn't ask any further and shook his head with a sigh. Senior Xie is a blessed person. Previously, you returned safely from Flame Forest Swamp, and this time, you retreated with Villa Master Chen and Senior Zhu. It's truly worthy of celebration. Xiaohua smiled and bowed towards Chen Yi and the others. Junior congratulates you. Xiaohua, you misunderstood. Chen Yi rolled her eyes and waved her hand. We haven't gone yet. We've made you wait for these past few days. Oh. Xiaohua was slightly stunned and smiled apologetically. Junior thought that seniors had already returned safely, so Junior was asked to come over. May I know, why did you call Junior over at this time? Xiaohua, do you know the lightning evasion technique? Xie Zhiqian asked with a smile. This. Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. He muttered in his heart and was very hesitant. Xiaohua. Chen Yi clapped her hand and took out a jade slip. She placed it in front of her and said with a smile, just now, this old woman and fellow Taoists calculated that the heavenly ingress is really difficult to obtain. This old woman also doesn't need the heavenly ingress, so I don't want to risk my life for this jade slip. However, since you followed fellow Taoist Ye's jade slip to my Burial Flower Manor, it can be said that you have fate with us. This old woman thought that if you know the lightning evasion technique and can help us at a crucial time, you can casually obtain the heavenly ingress without me doing anything. And, even if you have some difficulties at that time, fellow Taoist Ye and this old woman will definitely not stand by and watch because of your efforts. Of course, if you don't know the lightning evasion technique, your cultivation is just a child in our eyes. It's fine if you don't go. You can take back this jade slip yourself. The deal that this old woman said a few days ago can't be fulfilled. Xiaohua looked at the jade slip with a somewhat dumbfounded expression. He didn't know what to say. It's better to rely on yourself than others. Chang Yefeng also said with a smile, this Chang's master has always taught I this in my early years. Now, I will also use this to encourage you. Instead of letting fellow Taoist Qin help you, it's better for you to harvest it yourself. Of course, the premise is that you have the ability to do so. Xiaohua really didn't want to cooperate with these golden core stage seniors. He simply couldn't take any advantage. Let's not talk about other things, just take this matter as an example. Chen Yi returned the jade slip to him, but what about the secret technique? It had been more than 10 days. Xiaohua didn't think that Chen Yi would be like him in the past. She obtained so many jade slips but didn't know how to use them. She only cared about cultivating her own technique and carefully didn't check them. Now that Chen Yi returned the jade slip to him, as long as he took it, it would be like drawing water with a bamboo basket. Burial Flower Manor could be considered as a wasted trip. Thinking about Xue Xue's bitterness since the Misty Mountain and her calmness in the face of death, Xiaohua's heart was somewhat sour. If he could do something for his beloved, even if it was a little dangerous, what was there to be afraid of? Moreover, this young master is afraid of you in this Burial Flower Manor. Outside, no matter what dangerous place it is, you don't have the initiative. You also don't know this young master's methods. Why would this young master be afraid of you? Xiaohua lowered his head, thought for a moment, then raised his head again and said with difficulty, for seniors, this junior has practiced some lightning escape technique, but it's only the hibernating lightning escape technique. It hasn't been successful yet. It's 3 times faster than ordinary foundation establishment stage cultivators, but in front of seniors, it's still not a big deal. If this junior goes, I'm afraid I won't be able to help much. Alas, that's a pity. Chen Yi's face was full of regret. She pushed her hand and said, this old woman still wants to participate in the dual cultivation ceremony between you and your junior sister, it seems. Hee. Xiaohua rubbed his hands and said with an apologetic smile, however, since seniors think highly of this junior and want to guide this junior, how can this junior not bravely move forward? As long as seniors can take care of this junior will definitely go with you seniors. Wait. Zhu Qinghe waved his hand and said, Xiaohua, tell me if you know how to do it or not. This old man wants to see. If you can't meet this old man's requirements, you still can't go. Senior, please consider. Xiaohua bowed and said, go. Xie Zhiqin waved his hand and a slender light flashed. A flying sword flew out from his sleeve like a meteor and stabbed toward Xiaohua's throat. Ah! Xiaohua was shocked. His body just wanted to dodge, but his heart slightly moved. His whole body flew up and quickly retreated, directly flying out of Linlang Pavilion. However, the more Xiaohua flew, the more he clearly felt that the railing of Linlang Pavilion was behind him, but he couldn't get close. Xie Yuqian's sword light was like a meteor, closely pressing in front of his eyes. Looking at that posture, it seemed like it wouldn't stop until it pierced his throat. Xiaohua could only use the hibernating thunder escape according to his early foundation establishment cultivation and didn't reveal the slightest bit of his cultivation. However, the sword light in front of him didn't give up and didn't stop at all. Senior Xie? Xiaohua helplessly exclaimed and said, this junior's cultivation can only be like this, please forgive me. Ha! Xie Zhiqin laughed loudly and waved his big sleeve. The sword light circled around Linlang Pavilion and flew back into his hand. He said, Xiaohua, your lightning escape technique is really good. The speed of your flying technique is comparable to this old man's. Xiaohua stopped. He was still at the railing of Linlang Pavilion and didn't fly out of the river at all. Xiaohua's face was extremely shocked. He looked around in disbelief and even raised his head to look at the river outside. He praised with admiration, Villa Master Qin, this junior really doesn't know what to say? This formation is too mystical, isn't it? Qin Yi's heart wasn't arrogant at all. However, a trace of complacency flashed across her face and she said with a smile, what does a little foundation establishment cultivator like you know? This is nothing more than an insignificant skill. Admirable, admirable. Xiao Hua smacked his lips and looked at Xie Zhiqian again. He sighed again. Senior Xie's flying sword doesn't seem to be much inferior to a sword cultivator's flying sword, right? Under this flying sword, this junior simply doesn't have the power to fight back. I really can only escape. Moreover, even if I did escape, I wouldn't be able to escape even if I exhausted all the magic power in my body. A core formation cultivator is really unfathomably profound. Unfortunately, this flying sword still can't compare to a sword cultivator. It lacks spirituality. Xie Zhiqian spread out his hand and a half-foot-long flying sword appeared in his hand. It was covered in flowing light and flying wings. Runes could be faintly seen. It was extremely impressive. Xiao Hua, your flying speed is indeed not bad. Unfortunately, it still doesn't meet this old man's standards. Zhu Qinghe shook his head, feeling very regretful. Fellow Taoist Jew? Chang Yefeng rushed to speak first. In my opinion, Xiao Hua is already not bad. I approve of him going. Zhu Qinghe frowned slightly and looked at Chen Yi again. Fellow Taoist Jew, Xiao Hua faced the flying sword and flew with his back facing it. For him to be able to dodge a core formation cultivator's flying sword for such a long time, this method should be the Imperial Thunder Sect's thunder evasion technique. In my opinion, he should be able to go. Chen Yi said with a beaming smile. Zhu Qinghe was helpless. He flicked his sleeve and said, all right then. Since all the fellow Taoists agree, then this Zhu can only agree. Chapter 1989. Many thanks for Senior Zhu's help. Xiao Hua bowed and said, all right, Xiao Hua, go back and meditate. Make preparations for your departure. After we discuss it, we will inform you as soon as we have a schedule, Chen Yi instructed. Xiao Hua knew that the four of them were going to discuss something, so he bowed and left. After returning to the pavilion, Xiao Hua sneered. How could he not know? Xie Zhiqian and Chang Yefeng had the lowest cultivation among the four of them. If there were any trivial matters or dangerous things to do, they would definitely go first. Now that Xiao Hua was here, he would be the one probing them. They would be a bit safer. As for Chen Yi, Xiao Hua had already thought it through, so he didn't feel like thinking about it anymore. You guys can laugh secretly. Xiao Hua secretly said, I don't know who will have the last laugh. However, this Senior Zhu has a good heart. He repeatedly stopped me from going. Unfortunately, he can't stop the other three. I have to give up. Xiao Hua had a good impression of Zhu Qinghe. But where are they going? What treasure are they looking for? How do they know there is sky in grass? Knowing the difficulty of this trip, Xiao Hua put all his doubts in the bottom of his heart. Taking advantage of the last bit of leisure, he practiced the soul stab technique to perfection. After another 10 days, Chen Yi came with Chun Kuei to call Xiao Hua. When Xiao Hua arrived in front of the mountain gate of Burial Flower Manor, Zhu Qinghe and the other three were already standing in front. Seeing Xiao Hua come over, Chen Yi asked, Xiao Hua, are you ready? We are going to leave now. If you regret it, it's not too late. You just have to wait for me in the manor. Junior has already thought it over. Senior Chang is right. Asking for help is better than asking for help. Junior will go with you seniors. I hope you seniors will help me. Xiao Hua bowed and replied. And, since it's like this, let's go. Chen Yi waved her hand, and a mirror-like brilliance flashed in her hand. It quickly rushed into the air, and a ripple of water appeared in front of her. Chen Yi raised her leg, stepped over the water, and disappeared in the air. Xiao Hua, our trip to that place this time is very secretive. You must pay attention to keeping it a secret. Along the way, you must listen to our instructions. You must not send any messages to the outside and reveal our whereabouts, Zhu Qinghe said coldly. If this old master finds anything inappropriate, don't blame this old master for being ruthless. Junior understands. Junior will follow Senior Zhu's words. Xiao Hua was scared and quickly bowed. Zhu Qinghe ignored him, and also stepped over the water. Let's go, young man. Xie Zhiqian glanced at Xiao Hua with a smile, and then left with Chang Yefeng. Xiaohua tilted his head slightly and looked at the door of Burial Flower Manor again. He also walked out of the formation. He was a little puzzled in his heart. The beauty-retaining grass was poisoned. He didn't know if Qin-Yi had found the culprit, but she left Burial Flower Manor so easily. If that person, for example, the Sun Qian that Qin-Yi mentioned, came to make trouble again, would Burial Flower Manor be able to withstand it? The more chaotic it is, the better. Xiaohua curled his lips and acted as if this matter had nothing to do with him. When they came out of the magic array of Burial Flower Manor, there was a flying boat among the flowers and plants. This flying boat was different from the drifting cloud flying boat. There was a bulging part on it, like a cabin. Seeing that Qin-Yi and others were already standing on it, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He flew up and silently stood beside Xie Zhiqian and was very respectful. "We are going to set off." Zhu Qinghe seemed to be talking to himself, but he also seemed to be talking to the others. With a wave of his hand, a multicolored light flew out from his sleeve and landed on the entire airship. The airship suddenly rose up, circled in the air, and then flew toward the east. As the airship ascended into the sky, it gradually became invisible and disappeared. About 1,000 feet away from the flying boat, between a cluster of verdant green leaves, there was a mountain rock that was about 10 feet wide that emitted a faint yellow light. It was like melting snow, and the figure of a cultivator appeared from the mountain rock. As the cultivator took off his cloak, the female cultivator with wrinkled skin and white hair was revealed. She was the Sun Qian that Qin-Yi mentioned. Strange. Qin-Yi, that slut, actually ignored the safety of Burial Flower Manor and followed a few strange cultivators? That little foundation establishment cultivator also followed them. Sun Qian was very puzzled, and her gaze fell on the magic array of Burial Flower Manor. Could it be that she has something important to do? Or is she just set up a trap for this old woman? Alas, it's a pity that this old woman's cultivation in magic arrays is still inferior to Qin-Yi's. She already found the only flaw in the magic array of Burial Flower Manor. This time, fortunately, this old woman took advantage of the flaw. Otherwise, with Qin-Yi's power, this old woman would have been captured by her. What a pity. Even if this old woman has another chance to go in, whether I can come out is another matter. But this old woman destroyed her beauty-retaining grass. How can she survive in the cultivation world of the country of Shi? Burial Flower Manor will really become the place of burial flower. Sun Qian thought for a moment, but still didn't have the courage to go to Burial Flower Manor. She quietly used the 5 elements escape technique to escape far away. Xiaohua stood on the flying boat. Seeing the faint brilliance of the flying boat blocking the astral wind in the sky, he was very envious. His flying skill was excellent, but this kind of long-distance travel consumed a lot of spiritual power. It was far less convenient than using a flying magic tool. If he had this flying boat, he would have already arrived at the seaside with Xue Xue, and he wouldn't have encountered so many things. There are quiet rooms on the flying boat. You can each find one to meditate. This trip will only last for a few days. I can control the flying boat alone. Zhu Qinghe stood with his hands in his sleeves and said coldly. It seemed that he still had a grudge against the 3 people who agreed to let Xiaohua follow them. Well, I still have some magic arts to comprehend, so I won't accompany fellow Zhu. Qian-Yi chuckled and went into the cabin first. I'll accompany fellow Zhu for a while. Chang Yefeng said with a smile, I can't do anything in a few days. It's better to chat with fellow Zhu. Xiaohua, you go and cultivate. Xie Zhiqian glanced at Xiaohua and said, this trip is very dangerous. If you can improve a little more, you can save your life a little more. Yes, thank you senior for your guidance. Xiaohua bowed and thanked him. However, this junior wants to ask, where are we going this time? Since we have already set off, can this junior make some preparations? But Zhu Qinghe sneered, Emojiao Black Forest. Ah? Emojiao Black Forest? Xiaohua's face turned slightly pale. Emojiao Black Forest was the first dangerous place he heard of. At that time, Ma Qingqing, who was abandoned by heaven, told him that hundreds of individual cultivators in the qi refining stage died at the edge of Mo Zhao Black Forest. They only obtained the remains of a cultivation method and magic weapon, which gave Xiaohua an extremely dangerous impression. Later, Xiaohua further learned that Mo Zhao Black Forest was more dangerous than Flame Forest Swamp, Mingxi, Weimeng Mountains, and Rising Dawn Mountains. In other places, except for Flame Forest Swamp, Xiaohua went a little deeper with Zhenyi and others, and Mingxi went a little deeper with Sun Shu's guidance. The other places were just a little bit outside. The other dangerous places were so dangerous, so Mo Zhao Black Forest was definitely not a good place. According to ordinary cultivators, it was a place where gold core cultivators could enter. What do you think? It's too late to regret now, Zhu Qing has said mockingly. Chapter 1990. Take a rest first. Chang Yefeng said with a smile, with fellow Taoist Zhu leading the way and us watching over you, you don't have to be afraid. Yes, Junior understands. Xiaohua's face relaxed slightly as he forced a smile and stepped into the cabin. Inside the cabin, as Zhu Qing has said, there were several small quiet rooms on both sides. Xiaohua randomly picked a room, opened the restriction, and sat down cross-legged with a calm face as he quietly pondered. After a while, Xiaohua's eyes lit up as he swept the room with his divine sense. With a wave of his hand, he took out a jade slip. It was the contents of the jade slip he had copied from Zhen Qing. Immediately after, he immersed his divine sense into it and carefully examined it for a long time. A smile appeared on his face, but soon after he was startled and revealed a trace of astonishment. He immersed his divine sense into the jade slip again and seemed to have discovered something special. Time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, several days had already passed. Xiaohua had already stored the jade slip into his space. He was still practicing the soul-piercing technique. On this day, the hull of the boat suddenly shook violently. Then it stopped. Have we arrived? Xiaohua stood up and thought to himself. However, I don't know if this place is close to the place Martial Uncle Zhen gave me. Xiaohua walked out of the quiet room, but before he could speak, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. The place in front of him was a continuous mountain range. This mountain range was overgrown with forests. It was emerald green, and countless faint clouds lingered on it. It was incomparably beautiful. However, in this place, there were thousands of cultivators who were divided into two groups and confronting each other. Each of them had activated their yellow talismans, magic tools, magic weapons, and other treasures. Not only were there brilliant lights lingering around, but all kinds of sounds were incessant. Both sides were extremely fierce and didn't leave the other side any way out. Screams were accompanied by the sound of magic tools colliding with each other. Bloody light met the light of magic tools, and a tyrannical and terrifying aura filled the entire mountain range. Senior Zhu, what's going on? Xiaohua asked in a low voice. How would this old master know? Zhu Qinghe scolded angrily. When the airboat was about 10 miles away from here, it was stopped by someone and could neither leave nor move forward. This old man wants to ask about it. Xiaohua didn't dare to ask again and could only stand next to Xie Zhiqian and watch. Sure enough, there were several golden core cultivators standing in the air 1,000 feet in front of the flying cloud ship. They all held magic treasures in their hands and coldly looked around. There was also a rhombus-shaped flying magic tool several miles away from the flying cloud ship. These cultivators seemed to be disciples of the splendid sect. Chen Yi was experienced and knowledgeable. She said in a low voice, "One of them looks very familiar. I think I've seen him somewhere before." What are the cultivators of the magnificent flower sect doing in the vicinity of Ink Cloud Black Forest? Who are their opponents? Zhu Qinghe was somewhat puzzled. His eyes flickered. We just happened to be here. Could it be? As he spoke, he looked at the golden core cultivators in the distance. I'm afraid we won't be able to force our way in. Chang Yefeng smiled bitterly. These people are all at the middle stage of the gold core realm, and the other two are at the late stage of the gold core realm. Motherfucker, these old monsters are about to be pregnant. Why are they still out here? What do they want to do? Boom! There was a loud sound. In a place slightly closer to the flying cloud ship, an early-stage golden core cultivator took out a magic treasure. Countless huge rolling logs flew out from the magic treasure. These rolling logs flashed with a strong green brilliance and smashed towards his opponent. His opponent was holding a flat magic treasure the size of a palm. Drops of true water also flew out from the magic treasure, trying to block the huge logs. However, it was clear that the power of the giant tree was beyond his imagination. The waves formed by the primordial water were smashed into pieces by the giant tree, and he himself was also hit by the giant tree. Although his body flashed with a protective blue light, he was still smashed into a bloody mess and fell from the sky. Strange. Xiaohua was a little shocked. They are all golden core cultivators. Their magic treasures and magic treasures are not too different. With the protection of the defensive brilliance, it is impossible to kill them directly. How can this splendid sect disciple kill his opponent directly? Could it be that this disciple's cultivation is close to the nascent soul stage? Obviously, Zhu Qinghe and the others also noticed the strange scene. Their faces were very gloomy. Xie Zhiqian smiled bitterly and said, "The splendid sect is indeed a famous sect in the country of Xi. I'm afraid my Immortal Ascension sect is not as good as them." Chang Yefeng didn't say anything, but Qin Yi frowned and looked around as if she was looking for something. "Fellow Taoists, secretly release your divine sense." After a moment, Qin Yi whispered, "See if the spiritual energy here is a bit strange?" Xiaohua naturally wouldn't stand out. He quietly watched. Sure enough, after a short while, Zhu Qinghe sneered and said, "It really is slightly strange. The wood element spirit energy of the heavens and the earth here is extraordinarily abundant, and it's simply comparable to an abode. Under such circumstances, how could a water element magic treasure resist a wood element magic treasure? If the splendid sect disciple has a little secret technique, it is not strange that he can directly kill a cultivator of the same cultivation level. But the question is, why is the spiritual energy here so rich? Why does the splendid sect want to kill these opponents?" Chen Yi bit her lips and said, "Moreover, since we have encountered this matter, if it were up to me, those golden core cultivators of the splendid sect should have killed us long ago to prevent this matter from spreading out. But they didn't do it and just didn't allow us to intervene. In other words, they didn't mind us watching. The matter here is really interesting. I'm afraid the splendid sect has taken a fancy to this paradise and wants to drive away the cultivators here." Chang Yefeng didn't know the situation in the country of Xi and guessed. Xie Zhiqian shook his head slightly. "I don't know what kind of sect is here. Although Foundation establishment cultivators make up the majority, but such a force is definitely not a cultivation family. Spirit stone vein." This thought suddenly flashed through Xiaohua's mind. He had just left Tianmen Mountain and had a deep memory of the rise and fall of Tianmen Mountain's Huang family. It was very easy for him to think of this. Gee! A sharp sound came from a magic treasure in the hand of a splendid sect golden core cultivator who was watching from afar. Following the sound of the golden core cultivator, the disciples of the splendid sect who were fighting withdrew their magic power at the same time and escaped from the battle. They flew back more than 10 feet and then began to fly in different directions. From afar, they looked like scattered but orderly flies. Formation attack. Xiaohua understood at a glance. He had already seen this formation when he was in Mingxi. Sure enough, in the blink of an eye, several hundred cultivators had already formed a formation in picturesque disorder. Looking at the cultivators on the other side, they were also flustered and impatiently flying in formation. However, compared to the order of the splendid sect, they were still far inferior. "Gee!" the golden core cultivator angrily shouted. Following his hand gesture, the magic treasure he took out screeched in the air and rushed into the formation of the cultivators on the other side. At the same time, as if issuing a command, all the disciples of the splendid sect roared in unison. The magic treasures, and yellow talismans in their hands all attacked together. These things actually formed the shape of a fist and attacked the cultivators on the other side in an orderly manner. In contrast to the cultivators of the splendid sect, the cultivators on the other side reacted somewhat hastily and even somewhat disorderly. The magic treasures and other things that were sent flying didn't even reach half of the distance before they were suppressed by the magic power of the fist formed by the magic treasures of the splendid sect. Their speed and power gradually decreased. Good heavens, this is a powerful method. Xiao Hua saw that this method of attack was simply incomparable to the cultivators of Mingxi. He couldn't help but inwardly sigh. If he encountered such a formation in Mingxi, he definitely wouldn't be able to charge through. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The fist knocked down the scattered magic treasures. The cultivators on the other side all fell from the air. Among them, 30% of the cultivators never flew again. The other cultivators scattered like birds and beasts and fled in panic. Hey, where did this cultivator come from? You dare to bully my fallen deer mountain? With a roar, a rainbow-like brilliance flew over from the distance. However, when the brilliance dissipated, a middle-stage golden core old man with disheveled hair and a red face appeared. He looked at the several golden core cultivators on Xiao Hua's side in astonishment. Clearly, he didn't notice these people with his divine sense. Fellow Taoist Kong? The old man's eyes were somewhat alarmed. He stared at one of the golden core cultivators and asked in disbelief, "Why does your splendid sect covet my fallen deer mountain's foundation?" Fellow Taoist Ming. The so-called fellow Taoist Kong unhurriedly took several steps forward and sneered, "I didn't expect you to remember me after meeting me in Flame Forest Swamp. However, since you and I are fated to meet, I'll give you a word of advice. The Spirit Stone Mine in Liaoming Mountain Range already belongs to my splendid sect. If fellow Taoist Ming is tactful, I won't be ruthless. Take these fallen deer mountain disciples and quickly leave. Liaoming Mountain Range is my fallen deer mountain's foundation. How can you give it away just because of a few words from your splendid sect?" The cultivator surnamed Ming was somewhat indignant and unwilling. "Fellow Taoist Ming, whether you leave or not is up to you. That's all I have to say." The cultivator surnamed Kong ignored him and retreated with a flick of his sleeve. The cultivator surnamed Ming's eyes narrowed. He looked at the golden core cultivators on guard and then looked at the fleeing fallen deer mountain disciples who were looking at him in an extremely sorry state. He sighed and turned his head. Once again, he transformed into a rainbow and quickly flew in the direction he came from. The other fallen deer mountain disciples also flew up and followed behind the cultivator surnamed Ming. However, many of them were unwilling to give up and looked back. The weak are prey to the strong. This was the only thought in Xiao Hua's mind. Spirit Stone Mine? The fallen deer mountain cultivator's voice wasn't soft. Qin Yi, Zhu Qinghe, and the others also heard him. They looked at each other with shock and even greed on their faces. Soon after, the several hundred splendid sect disciples landed in the mountain range and disappeared. The cultivators blocking the flying ship also left without paying any attention to Zhu Qinghe and the others. Chapter 1991. How could Xianghua sect forcibly occupy Deer Descent Mountain Spirit Stone Vein? The flying boat flew for a long time before everyone finally calmed down. Although the battle just now was not too big, the situation was really strange. Zhu Qinghe unconsciously frowned and looked at Chen. Indeed, the Spirit Stone Vein in the country of Xi is so small that it has long been controlled by various large sections. Moreover, for hundreds of thousands of years, a kind of balance has been formed. Xianghua sect is not likely to act rashly. Chen Yi was also puzzled. I'm afraid Xianghua sect is coveting Deer Descent Mountain? Chang Yefeng asked hesitantly. Impossible. If Xianghua sect wants to annex Deer Descent Mountain, Xuanyan School and Qiqiao sect will be the first to disagree. Chen Yi shook her head. Moreover, Xianghua sect did not kill the disciples of Deer Descent Mountain. Even that cultivator surnamed Ming was released by Xianghua sect. It seems like their target is the spirit stone vein. Snatching the spirit stone vein will definitely cause an imbalance between the 3 cultivation sects in the country of Xi. Zhu Qing has said curiously, Shanghua sect is drinking poison to quench their thirst. Not necessarily. Qin Yi sneered. She looked at the darkness far away from the astral winds. Perhaps other sects have the same idea, ah? Zhu Qinghe and the others were not as confused as Xiaohua. Even Chang Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian understood something from this sentence. They were shocked and secretly cried out in their hearts. Then they fell silent as if thinking about something. Xiaohua could not think of too many disputes. Seeing that the 4 of them were silent, he did not ask anything. He only thought about how to protect himself when he reached Ink Cloud Black Forest. Several hours later, the darkness in the distance was getting closer. Xiaohua could see clearly that the darkness did not only cover the mountain rocks and trees, but also the air was faintly filled with a black fog. Even the sunlight that shone into the depths of Ink Cloud Black Forest reflected a faint black light. A kind of solemnity, a kind of sadness, a kind of fear, and even a kind of fear quietly emerged from the bottom of Xiaohua's heart. Fellow Zhu, we are about to reach the Ink Xiao Black Forest. Are we going to enter from the edge? Qin Yi's expression had returned to normal as she asked with a smile. What can we do if we don't enter from the edge? Zhu Qinghe smiled bitterly. If Manor Hedshin has a shortcut, that would be the best. You don't say, I do have a small secret path. Chen Yi pursed her lips and smiled. Really? Zhu Qinghe was overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, I'm afraid the edge of the Ink Cloud Black Forest is hundreds of miles long, and there are dangers lurking everywhere. Although it's nothing for Gold Core Realm practitioners like us, it's still troublesome. If Manor Hedshin has a shortcut to enter the forest, it's great that we can concentrate on dealing with the dangers inside. What about my share? Can I have an extra portion? Chen Yi widened her eyes and asked with watery eyes. Manor Lord Chen, why didn't you tell me earlier that you have a secret path into Ink Cloud Black Forest? Chang Yefeng was a little displeased. We've already discussed all the details. Isn't it a little too much for the Manor Lord to suddenly make a request when we're already here? Is that so? Forget it. Chen Yi was not angry. She smiled and said, Fellow Zhu didn't mention it at that time, and I didn't think about it. Now I just remembered that if Fellow Zhu doesn't agree, we'll follow Fellow Zhu and enter the forest according to the route he took last time. How about this? Zhu Qinghe thought for a while and said, Last time I entered the edge of the Ink Cloud Black Forest, it took me a lot of effort. Now that there are more people, it will be more troublesome. Since I asked too little, I'll give half of my share to Manor Hedshin. What do you think? Hee, that's great. Chen Yi wasn't courteous and agreed with a smile, and then she clapped her hand and took out a crystalline jade spoon before she said to Zhu Qinghe, Fellow Taoist Zhu, stop the flying boat. I'll find the location of the secret path. When Zhu Qinghe stopped the flying boat, everyone got out of the flying boat. They saw Qin Yi's hands forming a wonderful incantation. Every finger seemed to be dancing beautifully. As the spiritual power passed, the jade spoon turned into a woman less than 3 inches tall wearing a seamless heavenly robe. The woman's eyebrows were clear and her skin was as white as snow. Her figure flew with the brilliance, fluttering her sleeves as she flew toward the dark place in the distance. Her speed was not inferior to a cultivator at the middle stage of foundation establishment. Let's go. Seeing Jade Maiden fly, countless lights scattered in the air and turned into specks of flowers, Chen Yi revealed a smile. Her figure was actually the same as Jade Maiden's. She waved her Taoist robe and chased after her. Let's go. Zhu Qinghe looked at Qin Yi's narcissistic appearance and slightly shook his head. He waved his sleeves and led everyone to fly down. Xiaohua leisurely followed beside Xie Zhiqian. He slightly released his Buddhist sense and carefully guarded against everything in the vicinity. Hearing Qin Yi's words, Zhu Qinghe and others arranged everything. The division of the 4 people was also completely agreed. Only the heavenly ingrass was left for Xiaohua. As the Jade Girl flew closer to the Ink Xiao Black Forest, Xiaohua felt his eyes gradually darkening. Although the sun was really high up in the sky, There seemed to be something in the sky near the Inkzhao Black Forest that could not pass through light. It could even be said that it was something that could absorb light, blocking the light. But Xiaohua carefully examined it. Not only his divine sense, but also his Buddhist sense could not see anything. Even if he used his Dharma eye to examine it, he could only see a little bit of dark thing. It was exactly the same as what he saw with his naked eyes. After a while, Xiaohua felt somewhat strange. Usually, his true essence flowed smoothly in his meridians, but here, his true essence was unexpectedly somewhat obscure. It was as if sand was mixed in the river. Although it did not affect the river water, it always had a kind of heavy feeling. No wonder only Foundation Establishment and Golden Core cultivators can come to the Inkzhao Black Forest. Xiaohua somewhat understood. Qi refining cultivators' meridians are filled with true qi. When these black things enter the body, it is like a huge rock blocking the true qi, affecting the use of magic power. And in the body of Foundation Establishment cultivators, it can only be treated as gravel. As for Golden Core cultivators, all of their magic power is in the Golden Core. These black things may not necessarily enter the body. However, Xiaohua's true essence was originally filled with many black spots of earth crystal Yao milk. When these inexplicable things entered his meridians, it only made Xiaohua somewhat obscure. It actually did not have any effect. Even these black spots were absorbed by the earth crystal Yao milk, increasing little by little. Fellow Taoist Jew, it should be here. When the jade girl flew to a certain distance from the Inkzhao Black Forest, it stopped. It hovered in the air and did not move forward. Chen Yi covered it with her sleeve, and the jade girl turned back into a jade spoon and fell into her hand. Chapter 1992. This place doesn't look any different. Xiao Huayu looked around and saw that the coarse soil was suffused with a dim light. Low, clawing vines clung tightly to the ground. The thumb-sized leaves on them were uneven, and there were all kinds of shapes. The thick trees in front of them were so thick that several people could wrap their arms around them. The trees were not perfectly straight. Some were twisted, some were slanted, and the branches were crisscrossed. Strange birdsong could be heard from the sides or in front of them, rising and falling one after another. Suddenly, there was the sound of wind lifting up the branches and leaves, making one feel a chill. Zhu Qinghe clapped his hands and a green light flew out from his storage bag. It was a palm-sized jade flask. Under the activation of his dermic powers, the jade flask spewed out a silvery white light. The light was like a fountain that poured down from the top of Zhu Qinghe's head, protecting him. Xiaohua could clearly see that the light was slightly wrinkled and reflected light. It was actually in the form of granules, which seemed to be able to block out the black things in the Inkzhao Black Forest. Xiaohua, the ink sand in the Inkzhao Black Forest is very strange. The deeper you go, the more there are. Not only does the ink sand drill into your meridians, but it can also block the circulation of true essence and even corrode it. It also seeps into your meridians, making your entire body heavier. In the end, your entire body won't be able to move. Xie Zhiqian reminded Xiaohua from the side. Normal protective light can't block the ink sand. You're a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, so if you're not of the lightning attribute, then you're of the fire attribute. If you release your protective lightning or fire, it should be effective. As he spoke, Xie Zhiqian also clapped his hand, and a strange magic tool that looked like a gourd appeared. A layer of faint, flame-like spirit light protected Xie Zhiqian. Seeing everyone take out their methods, Xiaohua felt bitter. He only knew that he was coming to the Inkzhao Black Forest on the flying boat, so he didn't make any preparations. In the burial flower manor, there was clearly time to explain, but no one said a word to him. Now that he was here, they wanted him to take out his methods. It was clearly bullying. Chen Yi was wearing a tricolored robe, and the cloud-like mist enveloped her inside. She flew to Xiaohua's side and said with a smile, "Xiaohua, it's not that I don't want to remind you, but I thought that this place was hidden and I couldn't let you out of Burial Flower Manor. Since you can't go out, what's the use of telling you? If you have any tricks up your sleeve, use them for now." Otherwise, I have a Yusha that can block Mo Sha as well. After saying that, Chen Yi took out a thin robe and handed it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua knew that since a golden core cultivator had to take out a magic weapon to protect himself seriously, his own flame might not necessarily be of use. Thus, he didn't hold back and reached out to grab the silk cloth and put it on with a flip of his hand. He saw that the silk cloth was thin and tight, producing a faint brilliance that blocked the ink sand, making it seem as if he wasn't wearing it at all. "Thank you, Manor Lord Qin." Xiaohua bows and says, "Kid, I really don't have any protective magic treasures here." "Yes, just remember it in your heart." Chen Yi smiled and looked into the ink shadow black forest. "Manor Lord Qin, please lead the way," Zhu Qinghe said in a low voice after releasing his divine sense and looking for a moment. Chen didn't hold back and waved her hand, saying, "Fellow cultivators, please follow me." Then, as if to remind them, she says, "This secret path was discovered by a fellow cultivator by chance. He just told me the general direction and route. This is the first time I've entered it. The secret path is about 100 feet from the ground and about 10 feet in radius. If your divine sense is strong enough, you should be able to find some clues. However, although there is a secret path and we can fly in it, we'd better not go too fast. It is said that the outer diameter of the secret path is very thin. If we attract too much spiritual chi of heaven and earth, the secret path will be destroyed." "What? We can fly in the secret path? We can't fly outside?" Xiaohua is a little surprised and looks at the dark forest in the distance. The Mo Sha can enter the meridians with the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Although the Mo Sha disappears after leaving the ink shadow black forest, it is obvious that the magic power of ordinary cultivators is greatly reduced in the ink shadow black forest. No wonder ordinary cultivators can't enter it. As for those rogue cultivators, they can only swim in the periphery. While Xiaohua is thinking, he has already followed Xie Zhiqian into the ink shadow black forest for more than 100 feet. Xiaohua has a feeling that he is trying to escape through the sand. A faintly discernible repelling force is produced, as if it is trying to squeeze him out of the ink shadow black forest. When no one was paying attention, Xiaohua opened his Dharma eyes. Just as Chen had said, the black sand around them was much lighter. It looked like a passageway, about 30 meters above the ground. The edges of the passageway swayed slightly, like seaweed swaying in the water. Motherfucker, how were these passageways discovered? Do other people have the same Dharma eyes as I do? Xiaohua is a little speechless. After flying for another hour, because they are not flying fast and the passage is not leading directly to the inside of the ink shadow black forest, there are some twists and turns, like a small path in the forest. Although it leads to a secluded place, it is still a winding path. "Fellow Zhu, don't worry. Although we can fly in this secret passage, it seems to be a little long," Chen Yi said in a low voice. Her voice is very loud in the dark, and the crisp chirps in the surroundings are much fainter now, indicating that they have entered the depths of the ink shadow black forest. "Well, it's not bad," Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. "Although I went in directly last time, I didn't fly so fast or so easily, and I used a lot of magic power. Although this secret passage is a long detour, it is better in that it is easy. Alas, if I came to the ink shadow black forest alone, even if I know that the sword Immortal's remains are inside, I may not dare to break into the inner layer of the ink shadow black forest." Chang Yefeng sighed in a low voice. "The sword Immortal's remains?" Xiaohua's body trembles, and his eyes are filled with disbelief, looking at Xie Zhiqian beside him. Xie Zhiqian coughed and said in a low voice, "Fellow Chang, you should be careful with your words. We are already at the edge of the ink shadow black forest. Even if Xiaohua wants to leave, he needs to have the courage to do so." Chang Yefeng sneered, "Even if he wants to leave, can I let him leave at will?" Well, since we are here, I guess fellow Chang also has doubts in your heart, and you want me to explain the reason?" Zhu Qinghe understood Chang Yefeng's meaning and thought that Xiaohua didn't know the truth, so he nodded slightly and said, Then he looked at the darkness in the distance and said, "Since Manor Lord Qin found this secret passage, and we have some free time, let's just kill some time. I will tell you everything so that you won't be confused." "Senior Zhu, thank you for your explanation," Xiaohua said respectfully. "This junior is indeed confused, and I don't know why you came to this dangerous place. Of course, if you don't want to tell me, this junior will just follow you inside." "Hee, I didn't tell you before because this matter is too secretive and has something to do with our cultivation. If others knew, especially the cultivators of the Seven Skills sect who use flying swords, I'm afraid we wouldn't have a chance," Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. "On the contrary, I know that not many of the cultivators of your Imperial Thunder sect are good at using flying swords, so I'm not afraid to tell you. This is why I agreed to let you come." Xiaohua despised him in his heart. If Chen Yi and the others didn't have ulterior motives, Zhu Qinghe wouldn't have let him come. However, without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Zhu Qinghe said, "Xiaohua, do you know about sword cultivators?" Xiaohua rolled his eyes and shook his head slightly. "This junior was previously a loose cultivator in my country of Xi. My cultivation was very shallow and my knowledge was also very limited. I only wanted to cultivate to the 10th layer of Qi refining and enter a cultivation sect. In fact, this junior always wanted to enter the Huanhua sect, but who knew that I would enter the Imperial Thunder sect by accident? However, after entering the Imperial Thunder sect, I discovered that the cultivation sect wasn't a pure land, so this junior buried himself in cultivation. Now that I finally reached foundation establishment, I have the opportunity to come out and experience the world. I won't hide it from Senior. Presumably, Senior also knows about this junior's junior sister's matter. This junior only cares about matters related to himself, so this junior doesn't know much about sword cultivators." Seeing Xiaohua's sincere words, as if he was confessing, Zhu Qinghe smiled and nodded. He didn't comment and said, "That day when fellow Taoist Xie tested your sword light, did you know? Isn't that a flying sword?" This junior naturally knows. Xiaohua admitted honestly, "This junior used a flying sword talisman when I was Qi refining, and there's also a flying sword talisman in my storage pouch." As he spoke, Xiaohua clapped his hands, as if he was going to take out a flying sword talisman from his storage pouch. There's no need," Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. "The flying sword talisman is only a yellow talisman. It can't be compared to a real flying sword, let alone a spirit sword." "Yes, please dispel my doubts, Senior Zhu," Xiaohua replied in a well-behaved manner. "Actually, on my Xiaoyu continent, besides Taoist techniques, there are also sword cultivators, soul cultivators, beast cultivators, and so on." Zhu Qinghe said in a low voice, "Xiaohua, could it be that your master didn't tell you about it?" Zhu Qinghe suddenly asked, causing Xiaohua to be stunned. He slightly opened his mouth and said awkwardly, "This junior also asked about it before I reached foundation establishment, but my master said that I only needed to know and cultivate well. First, I had to reach foundation establishment, and then I wouldn't ask about anything else." When this junior reached foundation establishment, he wanted to introduce this junior to the senior sisters of the Imperial Thunder sect. Why didn't this junior just escape? At this point, Xiaohua's heart trembled, and his forehead was almost covered in sweat. That day, he had told Chen Yi about the Feather Immortal assembly at the Burial Flower Manor, but he didn't seem to have mentioned the matter of Zhang Yuhe and Zhang Yutong. Xiaohua's eyes turned rapidly, and he repeatedly thought about it. Seeing that Chen Yi's flying figure didn't change, he finally relaxed. What a sentimental person. Zhu Qinghe glanced at Chen Yi and said, "Sword cultivators are sword cultivators. All of their techniques are related to a flying sword." Then, Zhu Qinghe roughly explained the matter of sword cultivators and finally said, "Actually, sword cultivators and Taoist techniques aren't completely separated. Within my Tao sect, there are also many cultivators whose magic tools or magic treasures are flying swords. For example, fellow Taoist Xie, fellow Taoist Chang, and I. Moreover, my Tao sect's flying sword technique isn't inferior to sword cultivators' flying swords. Even as early as hundreds of thousands of years ago, there were nascent soul stage experts who went to the Huan country to challenge sword cultivators. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.